Ladies and gentlemen, can we just step inside? We already a few minutes late. I think it's important that we also give those who are perhaps stuck in traffic the opportunity to get here in time. I trust that if speakers have presentations, that they just give it to the team there in the right-hand corner so that they can then present it on the screens here in front. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Christo van der Rede, the Executive Director at the Foundation. And you might rightfully ask, what is the purpose of today's gathering? Earlier this year, we've had a very big conference where we've had the Minister of Local Government, also the Auditor General, speaking about the challenges that municipalities face. And obviously, that was quite a revelation in the sense that we've had top government officials that said, but we are in serious trouble when it comes to local government. We then thought it good to organize an event like this to say, we understand what the problems are, but let us now shift towards resolutions or solutions for the challenges that we face. And we're quite privileged to have a very good team here today. But it goes beyond just a conversation. It also emphasizes the importance of networks. How do we create a network in every town, in every region, a network of people that really takes the country's interest at heart to help solve the challenges that we face? Yes, we have capacity problems, we've got fiscal problems, we've got a whole range of problems, ethical problems, you can name it. But there's no use we sort of get stuck into, talking about the challenges. What contribution can each one of us make to bring about a change and put this country on the right trajectory? The trajectory that started in 1994 to premise our constitutional democracy on three basic values. Those values are very explicitly defined in the Constitution. First one talks about accountability. Second one talks about responsiveness. The third one talks about transparency. If we only go back to those values, make sure that whatever we do is aligned with those values, I tell you, we will be much further down the road in terms of the challenges that we face and the solutions that are required to overcome that. So it's then my privilege. We've got quite a lot of very affluent guests here this morning, and I will then ask Christina Teichmann, who is our Deputy Chairperson and currently also our Acting Chairperson at the Foundation, to do the welcome. And after that, we've got Gregor Jaker from CAS. Also, you'll see a few changes on the program. We've got the Deputy Director General from National Treasury. She will talk about achieving financial capacity. Also, Zolani Zwane, Deputy Director General at the Department of Water and Sanitation. Dr. Michael Sutcliffe. Also, Mametsi Masimola, Head of Infrastructure at South Africa. And then also we've got Mayor, Christopher John Papas, Executive Director at the Umgeni Local Municipality. So ladies and gentlemen, for the few changes, we apologize for that. But I think it was, due to unforeseen circumstances. Over to you, Christina.
Thank you very much, Christo. Good morning, everybody. And on behalf of the FW de Klerk Foundation, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining us this morning, either in person or via live stream, for our Constitutional Rights Conference that focuses on practical solutions for local government. And I think it's important, as Christo mentioned, that we not only identify problems, but that we quite actively look how can these problems be solved and how can we work together to make municipalities and local government more responsive and work better and perform better. This conference would not have been possible without the generous support of our long-term partners, the Konrad Adenauer Foundation. Thank you, Gregor Jecke, who could not be with us today. He sends his apologies. And the whole CAS team, especially Chris. Where is Chris? Christian Endres. He will represent the foundation today. For your partnership, we value that very much, and we have enjoyed it over many years already. Thank you. I also want to introduce to you Daniela Ellerbeck. I don't know if she's here in the room, but she's our constitutional rights manager. And she put this conference together and also the lineup of esteemed speakers. So thank you very much, Daniela, for making this conference possible. Local government is the sphere closest to the people. It is a governance sphere where citizens experience firsthand and in real time if a municipality is well managed or not. Political instability, often caused by coalition governments that fall apart, administrative weaknesses and financial mismanagement do have an immediate impact on the lives of ordinary South Africans. Taps that run dry, waste that is not collected, water that is not clean, electricity supply that is unreliable, not enough affordable housing opportunities, deteriorating roads and infrastructures are just a visible sign that a municipality lags behind its constitutional mandate. That municipalities across South Africa are in a real crisis is evident when looking at the National Treasury's decision to temporarily withhold the July 2026 equitable share transfer to selected municipalities due to persistent and serious non-compliance with the Municipal Financial Management Act. This measure seems harsh but consequential when taking into account that in 2024, 116 municipalities, that's around 45%, adopted unfunded budgets. In other words, they allocate money to projects that they actually don't have. Today, we want to focus on what can be done to improve this situation. Our esteemed speakers will unpack this question from a service delivery perspective, from a national treasury and budget perspective, from a housing and infrastructure perspective and a water waste perspective, as well as from an economic and political perspective. This year is a special year as we celebrate the 30th anniversary of the South African Constitution, often hailed as the most modern in the world. Later this year, we will see the local government elections taking place. The vision of the FW de Klerk Foundation is to make the Constitution a reality for all South Africans. We believe that local government plays a crucial role in achieving this goal. Without further ado, I wish us all an interesting morning and a fruitful discussion. Thank you very much. And I would like to hand over then to Chris to say a few words from CAS. Thank you.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Here and online. Where's the camera? Good morning. Distinguished guests, fellow participants, speakers, the FW de Klerk Foundation, good morning. I'm not Gregor Jecke, as you probably perceive. I wish I was better looking, but you get what you get. Good. I'm thrilled that I'm allowed to be here this morning. The energy of the room is palpable, the topic is relevant, and I really appreciate the chance of meeting you in the flesh as well. Now, I'd like to briefly introduce the Konrad Adenauer Foundation, the organization which is supporting the FW de Klerk Foundation today. We're a German political foundation associated with the CDU of Germany, which is the governing party in Germany. And around the world, we promote democracy in over 70 countries. And we look to promote the idea of the rule of law, good governance, civic education. And I hope very much that it's evident why we wanted to be here today. Good governance, the rule of law, democracy, they all hang together like a finely twined rope. We can't look at any of them individually. Kaz has been here in South Africa for over 40 years. In that time, the role has never changed. We see ourselves as facilitators of dialogue, which means bringing together people from academia, from politics, practitioners, civil society, and of course voters and citizens, bring them together to exchange their views and experiences. Sustainable reforms can only be generated by South Africans themselves. We get visitors regularly from overseas, and quite simply explaining South Africa to foreigners is virtually impossible. We know best. I really mean that. The complexity that we have in this country is enormous, and it's only in rooms like this where we can actually tackle the big challenges that we have. As mentioned, the discussion is particularly pertinent today. South Africa will go to the polls on the 4th of November. And I don't know how it is up here, but certainly I'm still waiting for a big push from the political parties to try and gain my vote. I'm hoping it'll happen soon. Municipal government is really where I decide whether democracy is for me. I enjoy the fact that the president gets to fly all over the world, but at the end of the day, I want to have water in my tap. I want the light to come on when I flick a switch. That is why I want to go vote. So I hope very much that the parties will come to me soon to make their case why they think they will make the water run. Now, one of the privileges of working for the Konrad Adenauer Foundation is not just being in spaces like this in South Africa, but we also take South Africans to Germany to learn from there, and vice versa, to introduce South Africans to Germany. Now, earlier this year, we organized a study and delegation trip on the topic of local governance. We had a number of practitioners and politicians with us, and the solutions from other countries really can't be copy and pasted. This is the overriding thing we learned. But there is something very valuable in studying a different system, because suddenly it makes you aware of how strange your own system is. There's enormous value in international dialogue, even in topics that are as local government. So to the practitioners in the room, I really want to emphasize, keep looking outwards, not for solutions, but for new perspectives, for our own solutions. We have a very impressive panel of speakers today. We see experience from local government, public administration, infrastructure, policy, and the people with the checkbook, which is National Treasury, of course. They're not isolated topics and isolated practitioners. They are all interconnected. Financial stability requires investment in infrastructure. Reliable infrastructure requires economic growth. Economic growth strengthens municipal finances. And finally, effective local government improves the quality of life of citizens who then hopefully go vote. These things are all interconnected and they all fit together. As a final thought, I'd like to say thank you again to the FW de Klerk Foundation for the long-standing partnership founded on joint values. It is always a pleasure working with you. I'm grateful to the colleagues who organized this event, and I'm enormously grateful to the speakers and the participants who joined us today to have this topical conversation that will help us make a better South Africa after 4 November. I thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, I don't want to, focus on specific people, but I think it's just right to also welcome Deputy Minister of Higher Education and Training, Mr. Yusuf Kasim. Please stand, sir. Yeah, welcome. And then also the Embassy of Japan. We've got the ambassador here, Mr. Fumio. Welcome to you. And then, are there any other ambassadors or ministers besides? Yeah. Okay. So, welcome to you specifically, and then obviously to all other guests that's here today. Ladies and gentlemen, it's now my privilege to welcome Oholatsen Garekwe, the Deputy Director General, Intergovernmental Relations from National Treasury, and he will speak to you in terms of how to achieve financial capacity to ensure effective service delivery. Welcome, sir. Sorry, my mistake.
Good morning. I hope I'm audible. As introduced, my name is Ohalaletseng Gaarekwe, Deputy Director General at the National Treasury. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. So I'll be using the speaking notes together with the presentation, but the presentation purely is to just give you a graphics in terms of how we see the situation within municipalities. So on the screen, what you see there, it's really about the planning and budgeting and reporting and ultimately accounting by municipalities. But let me start by saying when we speak about service delivery in South Africa, we're ultimately speaking about the ability of municipalities to improve the daily lives of citizens of South Africa or South African municipalities. Communities judge local government not by what we see on the screen there in terms of do you have an IDP, you have a budget, or you are reporting on a monthly basis. National Treasury is publishing your quarterly reports, and you submit your annual financial statements to the Auditor General, and you table an annual report. They don't judge you based on that, but they judge you, as has been indicated by the previous speakers, by whether water runs from their taps, whether refuse is collected, whether roads are maintained, and whether electricity is reliably supplied. But what we see on the screen just shows you in terms of what the Constitution requires and places on municipalities. We know that municipalities are the center of service delivery, and Section 152 of the Constitution requires municipalities to provide services in a sustainable manner and promote social and economic development, while Section 153 of the Constitution also requires municipalities to prioritize basic needs of communities through their planning and budgeting. And essentially, that's we have there, as I indicated, IDP is a 5-year strategy. And then the budget, as you know, we plan over 3 years, so that we kind of give a municipality predictability in terms of the funding that they have so that they can plan properly, and then they continue to report on a monthly basis. The Municipal Systems Act and Municipal Management Act also reinforces these obligations by establishing the frameworks for sustainable establishing frameworks for sound governance, financial management, accountability, and service delivery. And we believe that if you don't have these 4 pillars as a municipality, you are unlikely to succeed. However, while the legislative framework is comprehensive, reality across the local government sector demonstrates that having a mandate is not the same as having capacity to implement that mandate effectively. The real challenge facing many municipalities is not understanding what must be done, but rather having the financial, institutional, and technical capability to do that. And financial capacity is often viewed narrowly as the ability of a municipality to generate revenue. And in reality, financial capacity is far broader than that. It reflects a municipality's ability to generate, manage, allocate, and account for financial resources in a manner that supports sustainable service delivery. And you'll see that, as we're also indicating, one of the slides that I'm sure will be shared with you is just explaining in terms of what municipal financial capacity is not. It's not the money that we have in the bank. It's not the amount of grants you receive from national government, but its ability to really plan properly. And the next slide just really indicate in terms of what we mean by that. What are the four basic functions for you to have the pillars that support service delivery? A municipality with strong financial capability can effectively plan, maintain infrastructure, manage risks, and respond to community needs. And conversely, a municipality with weak financial management will struggle to maintain these basic services regardless of the quality of its plans. So it's not about the plans, but it's really about the capacity that we have internally as a municipality. And one of the most significant challenges facing municipalities at the moment is weak revenue management. And is the fact that, as it has been said, indicated by the previous speakers, and I think everyone in the room is aware of that a national treasury had withheld the equitable share. And there's been media report that says some are unable to pay salaries is precisely because of the weak revenue management within those municipalities. Many municipalities continue to experience low collection rates, inaccurate billing information, growing consumer debt, and unrealistic revenue projections. These challenges undermine cash flow and reduce the resources available for service delivery. Revenue is the lifeblood of local government. As you would know that in terms of the constitution, municipalities have been given more revenue raising powers, for example, than provinces. Provinces only collect 3 to 5% of their revenue. They rely on the national fiscus. But if you compare to municipalities, I mean, majority of their budget is really from revenue, and we believe that even what we see today, they can still do better than what we are seeing. And then just to amplify on that example, I mean, in this previous financial year, the budget of provinces, for example, all of them together, their budget was 810 billion. And out of that 810 billion, only less than 30 billion is their own revenue. But if you compare municipalities, their budget was 740, let's say 740 to 750 billion, but only less than 200 billion of that is from national transfer. So more than 500 billion they collected themselves, and there's still a challenge of under collection. In addition to that, we believe that they can easily get, their budget could be easily more than of those of the provinces, essentially. And at the same time, we know that municipalities are facing increasing service delivery demands, rising infrastructure costs, and growing community expectations. This pressure places considerable strain on already constrained financial resources. And what we see there, it's really what we have that leads to the challenges that we have. The issues of poor political governance are the challenges, poor municipal management or administrative or governance, or even the political administrative interface, the tension there is also a big challenge within local government. And obviously, we know about service delivery is a big issue. Socioeconomic challenges, when people cannot pay their bills, is a problem. And also, obviously, there are systemic also challenges within the system. Financial capacity is not only about generating revenue, it's equally about how financial resources are managed. Municipal Finance Management Act requires municipalities to adopt credible and funded budgets um, that are aligned with service delivery priorities. Unfortunately, some municipalities continue to experience challenges relating to unfunded budgets, unauthorized expenditure, and weak expenditure management. These challenges often result in projects being delayed, infrastructure deteriorating, and service delivery commitments not being met. Strong financial management creates the foundation um, for s- uh, creates the foundation for service delivery by ensuring that limited resources are directed towards priority needs and that infrastructure achieves value for money. The challenge, however, is that improving financial management requires more than just compliance with legislation. It requires capable institutions, skilled officials, reliable systems, and a culture of accountability. Experience have shown that financial problems are often a symptom of deeper institutional weaknesses, and part of it is what is in the slide. Um, when those the council in a way it's not functional in the administration, there are problems of financial management and all of that. One likely to see a good result. Poor record keeping, weak internal controls, inadequate oversight, and insufficient consequence management continue to affect the performance of many municipalities. Audit outcomes frequently point to recurring weaknesses in governance and accountability arrangements. Strengthening governance is therefore not simply a compliance exercise, it's a service delivery imperative. Oversight structures such as audit committees, municipal public accounts committees, and internal audits units play a critical role in ensuring that risks are identified and addressed early. When these structures function effectively, they contribute significantly to stronger financial performance and improve service delivery outcomes. However, um, governance structures can only be effective when they are supported by capable leadership and a commitment to ethical administration. And as I indicated, this slide on the screen, it just tells you what are the challenges in the administration, what are the challenges in council, because part of the reason why we withheld the equitable share, some of the work was not done by the committees of the council with regards to unauthorized, irregular expenditure, fruitless and wasteful expenditure, in terms of the consequence management and the investigations that ought to be done by these institutions. Looking ahead, capability will be one of the most important determinants of municipal success. Financial reforms, governance reforms, and service delivery improvements all depends on capable institutions and capable people. Municipalities require appropriately skilled professionals who can manage complex financial systems, prepare credible budgets, maintain infrastructure assets, and implement developmental programs effectively. The challenge of capability is especially evident in the area of professionalization. Many municipalities continue to experience vacancies in critical positions, skill shortages, and high dependence on consultants. And in most instances, municipalities spend significant amounts on consultants to prepare annual financial statements, as I think also this one has been raised by the Auditor General as well, because the required expertise do not exist internally. While consultants may provide temporary relief, they do not necessarily build sustainable institutional capability. And by indicating this, we're not necessarily saying we're against consultants. They're important to have those kind of skills, people to support municipalities. But just relying on them when they're not there, then the municipality collapse is not really helpful. Going forward, capability development must focus on in building internal capacity rather than simply purchasing expertise externally or outsourcing. This means investing in training, attracting scarce skills, retaining experienced professionals, strengthening leadership development, and ensuring that appointments are based on competence and professional standards. Capability will also be critical in addressing infrastructure challenges that we see where people are not able to have water, and we see the potholes in the roads. Across the country, many municipalities are struggling with aging infrastructure, maintenance backlogs, and increasing demand for investment in water, sanitation, roads, and electricity networks. Hence, the need for reform such as the Metro Trading Services reform that we're currently implementing in the metros at the moment. This year, in the second year of implementation, we started it in 2025-26. Effective infrastructure management requires technical expertise, project management capability, financial planning skills, and strong contract management practices. Without these capabilities, municipalities often experience project delays, cost overruns, and infrastructure failures. A capable municipality is not only to build is able not only to build infrastructure but also to maintain it sustainably over the long term. And this is essentially for protecting public investment and ensuring reliable service delivery. Another important dimension of capability that maybe some municipalities has not managed to understand is the ability to engage meaningfully with communities. The Municipal System Act recognizes the importance of community participation in municipal decision making. Communities need to understand that financial realities facing municipalities, while municipalities need to understand the priorities and concerns of their communities. Capable municipalities are characterized by transparent communication, inclusive planning processes, and responsiveness to the community concerns. That's very important. As capability improves, public confidence and trust are likely to improve as well. Greater trust can in turn contribute to better payment levels, stronger public participation, and improved cooperation between municipalities and communities. In conclusion, financial capacity remains the cornerstone of effective service delivery in South African municipalities. While legislation provides a clear framework and mandate, successful implementation depends on much more than compliance with legal requirements. It depends on capable institutions, capable leadership, capable systems, and capable people. Going forward, the sustainability of local government will increasingly depend on the ability of municipalities to strengthen financial management, improve governance, professionalize administration, manage infrastructure effectively, and build public trust. Ultimately, capability is the bridge between policy and service delivery. It is the mechanism through which financial resources are converted into tangible outcomes for communities. By investing in capability today, municipalities will be better positioned to deliver reliable services, strengthen financial resilience, and as well as develop as well as fulfill developmental mandate entrusted to them by the Constitution. Government is considering a host of reforms, and one of them I've spoken about them, which is the Metro Trading Services reform that we are already implementing to improve the system of local government, because we're always thinking about how best we can improve the how best we can improve the system of local government. There are a number of initiatives from National Treasury side. We've got a smart meter program that we're already implementing in municipalities. There's a debt relief program related, aligned to ESCOM debt relief program, where municipalities that are complying with that program, they've got a debt write-off, so that at least their finances can improve instead of just owing ESCOM. So they need to pay the current account. Part of it is to say you need to pay current account. And there are other reforms as well that we are busy in the process putting together to implement within the local government sphere. And we hope that these reforms will ultimately strengthen the foundation for improved service delivery. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for a very insightful presentation and giving us some deep insight into the relationship between Treasury and municipalities. And then obviously a lot of worrisome issues that you've raised. So thank you very much for that. Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker is Mr. Zolani Yizwani. He is also Deputy Director General for Regulation, Compliance and Enforcement at the Department of Water and Sanitation. Welcome, sir.
Good morning, everyone. To the Deputy Minister, Ambassador, and all protocol observed. My name is Olani Zwane. Christo, it's an X. Thank you. My presentation will focus mostly starting from a broader level of the value chain from the raw water supply, and then zoom in then into the challenges that we are dealing with today at local government level. I cannot see my presentation here. Oh, thank you. Starting from the supply and demand for raw water supply, we as a department contend that the water supply is in balance with existing demand, but on a national scale. But we do know that there are some localized deficits. We know about Nelson Mandela Bay, where there were challenges which were caused by drought. We also know currently in Gauteng, where we are, there is an increased demand, high-level leaks, and some also lack of investment by local government. Also in eThekwini, there are challenges as well of localized demand exceeding supply due to the increasing leaks, lack of also municipal investment in water. So we know that this could rapidly deteriorate as supply contracts, and then we should be in challenge due to economic growth, urbanization, inefficient use of water, including impact of climate change. So we know that we need to intervene as a department at a broader scale in terms of raw water supply. But we also cannot rely only on water surface supply, as I will indicate on the next slide. So we also know that the contribution to this contraction and the challenges with demand has also been caused by delay in the implementation of some of the major projects. For example, the Lesotho Highlands water supply, which will only come into effect in about 2029. The Unkomas, which I've already indicated, Umzimkhulu Dam, which are now being implemented by the department. We have also established the agency, which is the National Water Resource Infrastructure Agency, which was passed in Parliament last year. The board is now in place. It includes the amalgamation of the current CCCA, the Trans-Caledon Channel Authority, the Departmental Water Trading Entity, DWS, and then the Department of Water's Infrastructure Branch, which is currently responsible for the managing of all the 323 dams belonging to the department. So all these three entities will form the agency. We know that TCA currently, for it to borrow funds, it needs a guarantee from National Treasury. So we believe then with the having the WS infrastructure as part of this new agency, it will increase the water balance and it will be able to raise more funds without reliance on the National Treasury. The board has been appointed, as indicated. We hope there will be a CEO by end of December. And then we are busy with the process now of transitioning, bringing all the human resources from all these three entities into one, which will take about 2 years. It is a detailed, a deliberate, a comprehensive process. There will be challenges, but we hope that within the next 2 years, the agency will be in place or fully functioning. Then noting the challenges with relying on surface water. Already we are using about 75% of available surface water. So we know that as a department, we need to diversify our water mix, meaning that we need to increase the utilization of groundwater, desalination, also use the return flows from treated wastewater systems, reuse of other poor quality water such as acid mine drainage, which we are already using in Gauteng, as managed by TCTA. And we're also looking whether the groundwater schemes can be used at a regional level, because currently they are more localized and we are using them mostly for unserved communities. And then also, can we use the water ports? We have 6 water ports covering a number of areas in South Africa. Whether can they be used as well to focus now on the water resource development currently, which is currently done by the department. So these are the options that we are looking at in trying to diversify our water mix. But more importantly, we can build all these dams, but if we are not focusing on water conservation and demand management, where we see most of the water, as our minister would say, running down the streets, well, then it is a waste of effort. If we're looking at the average consumption in South Africa at the moment, it's currently at 218 liters per capita per day. And compare that with the international average, which is 173 liters per capita per day, we still need to do a lot in terms of water use efficiency and also utilization. So we cannot then rely on water surface use as a department. We need then to continue building more dams so that we remain affordable and sustainable, using the opportunities that we have at the moment. Our water resource planning unit has identified a number of dam sites across the country, but this requires funding to be able to take advantage of those planning processes, and they take longer as well to implement. So we then have to focus on diversifying our mix. So we also have to, more importantly, deal with the water conservation and demand management. So that is on a broader scale. If we now look at water services, focusing on the current progress as well as decline. Since 1994, we know that our government, through programs like RDP, has improved the national access to basic level of water services from 55% in 1994, and then it's staggered around 90% for the past 5 years, due, for example, to municipalities who are now prioritizing on rehabilitation of existing infrastructure rather than investing in new programs, particularly in remote areas where we have found that there's still poor supply to communities. But we also know that as much as there is this investment in infrastructure and increased access, the reliability has dropped to about 68%. So meaning you might have a tap in your yard, but the water maybe most of the time is not available or is of a poor quality. This information is also confirmed by Statistics SA. And this is also confirmed by the DROPS report, which the department is using to assess the performance of municipalities. We undertake 3 DROPS assessments. The first one, the blue drop, which assess the drinking water systems across the water services authorities. We also have the green drop, which focuses on wastewater treatment systems, and then the north drop, which focuses on water use efficiency. So we do this report alternatively every second year, and then on the other year, we evaluate the progress assessments reports. There was a time when we did not do these reports from 2014 up to 2022. So what do we get from this report since we started in 2022? It shows that 107 of 144 water services authorities, their systems and their performance of their drinking water systems and wastewater systems are around poor to critical. That means they score lower than 50%, up to 30% for poor, and then below 31%. So meaning if you evaluate the system of a municipality, looking at factors like the condition of the system, the maintenance, how they maintain it, the processes, how they conduct the processes for their systems, the staff that are employed by the municipalities, the finance allocated for the waste for the systems, they scored poor to critical. So this is about 74% of WSAs. And then if you look, which means that the percentage, this 74% WSAs, the drinking water in terms of microbiological water quality compliance, it has increased from 5% to 46%, which is a deterioration. So in 2014, they were about 5% that got poor to critical, and 2023 is about 46%, resulting in the highest risk of waterborne diseases such as cholera. And then 81% in terms of wastewater infrastructure is also poor and critical condition, which resulting in all the water pollution of our rivers. Now, looking on the right-hand side, the results of the 2025 North Rock Progress Assessment. If you look at that map here, okay, now I must be careful. It does not reflect the IEC map in November 2024, but it reflects the non-revenue water, which is about 47% across water service authorities. So, which means if we look at that map, you can see how much water is wasted, or the municipalities do not get revenue for it, which is about 47% across. So what is the main cause of this crisis? As a department, we have noted, it's confirmed by my colleagues now we are presenting, the inappropriate delivery models that is being utilized by the municipalities. The Water Services Act is clear on what's supposed to be done, but they've been inconsistent compliance by the municipalities. The first one being the lack of ring fencing of revenue from the sale of water, and the municipalities allocating water revenue to other functions. And also the lack of single point accountability for the water function, which then weakens the incentives for financially sustainable management of the function. Basically, you find that the water that is collected then is shared across the functions of the municipality. So revenue from water becomes a cash cow to be used for other functions. And you find that the budget for the municipality or the water services function is not linked to what is being collected. So with the results of this delivery model, as I've indicated, there's insufficient funding for infrastructure maintenance, for both drinking water and wastewater treatment, the poor asset condition resulting in leaks, and there's also slow leak repairs due to under-resourced and inefficient maintenance teams. What we have initiated as a department currently is with a parliamentary committee, the amendment to the Water Services Act. There will be a public consultation by the portfolio committee, which we are trying then to clearly separate the roles of Water Services Authority and then from the water services provision within within the municipality. So we make sure that the municipality is able to perform its water service authority role, which is constitutionally mandated to perform, and then separate it from the water services provider. I'm glad that we are in the presence of Dr. Mike Sutcliffe, who was able to implement this during his time at Ethekwini at the Metro. So he may maybe be able to expand on this, but it is possible. So one of the amendments is trying to then focus on that of the reform that we are doing. Although the municipality can perform both the functions of water services authority as well as water services provider, but they can also perform this function of the water services provider or allocate it to another independent institution or water services provider. So the amendments reinforces this by requiring them to separately undertake or report on this function. We are also introducing the licensing, which I will explain in the next slide. So to highlight what is currently happening in the Water Services Authority, we've got the functions which are fragmented across the municipality. You will have a technical head leading a technical department, but the key aspects which are required by him or her to manage an effective water services function are typically outside of their control. You find that they have little control over human resources, SCM, revenue generation. There is no single point accountability, and there's no ring fencing of revenue. So as indicated earlier, they receive a budget that has got no relationship with the revenue that is collected from the sale of water. And then that revenue is used for other purposes. So that's, in a way, no self-financing function can be sustainably managed in this way. But what are we trying then to achieve with the reforms? Is then to move towards a utility model, which will separate the WSA function from the water service provider function, and then also the ring fencing of revenue and expenditure. So where the water services head can have influence or be responsible for all the functions that are related to water services provision. This can be done either within the municipality, or it can be separated and be managed by another entity. As indicated, there are reforms underway by the department where we are clarifying the respective roles and responsibilities of the Water SA and WSP. We are also introducing the licenses, which will be a requirement for anyone performing a water services provision function in the country. So there will be a licensing process which will determine the requirement for anyone to provide this function, whether it's a municipality itself or a separate entity. So we will have to meet the requirements, and then the department will be able to categorize you depending on the size of the municipality as well. Then you will have a license. In the beginning, all WSAs will be licensed, and then there will be requirement for them to meet the requirement. Failing to meet the requirement, it will require them to undertake a Section 78 process where then they must outsource the function. That will be a part of the, it will be part of the compulsory process in terms of the amended Water Services Act. And then once that is the act is passed, we will be publishing regulations which will determine the process of the licensing process, how it will be implemented across the country. And we are also looking at issues of a blended finance mechanism and financial structuring support, which is being offered to the municipalities. One of the initiatives is the creation of a water partnership office under DPSA, which is assisting municipalities to deal with issues of non-revenue water. My colleague has also indicated on the Metro Trading Services grant, which is currently focusing on the metros, encouraging them to ring-fence revenue from the sale of their water to reinvest that revenue into their water function. We also know that the president is chairing the National Water Crisis Committee, which has established a National Water Action Plan, which is centered on the implementation of this reform. Those are the current reforms that we are currently doing. Indeed, there are other initiatives that the department is implementing, like supporting those 107 water services authority, where we are now focusing the grants that we have, like the RPIC, the Water Service Infrastructure Grant, to support those municipalities to address the issues. And then we've also promulgated the norms and standards, which are focusing on what the municipalities need to do to comply with the provision of water and also the wastewater treatment within their space. So with this, of course, there's still a long way to go. There will be resistance, which will come during the consultative process. But we have been engaging all the key sectors, like SALGA, COCTA are part of the process, and they are also part of the National Water Crisis Committee. In terms of regulation functioning, because that's also our mandate, we note that as a department, in terms of the National Water Act, we provide regulation at a national level. We have established catchment management agencies, 6 catchment management agencies across the country, which are responsible for regulation of the sector in terms of the National Water Act. We are strengthening this regulation function so that it becomes more consistent across the country. And it has resulted in an increased number of civil actions and criminal charges against municipalities, particularly for sewage pollution. I'm just indicating here the number of criminal cases that we have opened for sewage pollution. We've got 96 active cases involving 53 water services authorities across all 9 provinces. And in 53 of these cases, 42 have already been referred to the NPA for a decision to prosecute. We also work together with the DFFE, which has opened further 32 criminal cases. So cumulatively, we've got about 63 water service authorities which are being prosecuted for sewage pollution. 5 of our cases have resulted in court settlement in the plea and agreement with the 5 municipalities, where various charges have been issued, and these fines they entail the municipalities having to budget then for dealing with sewage pollution. It's still work in progress. We are observing the implementation of these court cases. Some we may find that the municipalities are not complying, and then we have to look at taking further action. But it has been working. But indeed, taking these actions does not resolve the issues of sewage still being a cause of the major pollution of our rivers. But we have to do it as a department. I think that was the last slide, just at a high level of the initiatives that are being implemented by the Department of Water and Sanitation. Maybe, Chair, in conclusion, let me also apologize for our Director General for not being here today. There is a special cabinet meeting that he is attending. Thank you.
Tolani Zwani, did I get that right? Thank you very much. And I think you've highlighted something there that really troubled me. I'm coming from agriculture, and South Africa is fortunate in the sense that we export fruit, you name it, to the rest of the world. And obviously, our own nation depends on safe food. And you can imagine the impact of sewage pollution on the food sector. It will have a devastating impact on our exports, international exports. It will have a devastating impact on the health of our nation if we don't deal with sewage pollution. I think if I would be you, I would really go out of my way to clamp down on municipalities that do not adhere to the guidelines that they should operate within in terms of preventing sewage pollution. But thank you very much for a very insightful presentation. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, then I would like to welcome Dr. Michael Sutcliffe. He's a former municipal manager at eThekwini Metropolitan Municipality, and he will talk to us in terms of how to accomplish affordable urban housing to realize sustainable development. Welcome.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone, and thanks very much for the invite. It's very good to be here, and particularly to my two colleagues, Khaled and Golani, because even though I've fought with their departments a lot over many years, I'm very proud of what we do. And I can't look at the United States or Germany or maybe even Japan, I don't speak Japanese, and be able to get the kind of sense of what the critical issues are in a country as a whole. Here I can go online and find a record every quarter of how much money each municipality is spending. Now it's got something called M-score. I can list and I can see how much they are. I now know that when I measure the security costs for Cape Town versus security costs in Johannesburg, I've got a record of that because they defined the same way. Can't do that in other countries. So there are things happening here that unfortunately those who want to whinge and whine and, oh, everything's in crisis, they'll carry on doing that. But the reality is they do that because we have a country that I think has a constitution, is guided by what it does. It still has delivery occurring. And yes, we've got plenty to whinge about. But what I'm going to do today is to say that where I do disagree with my colleagues here is that at a national level, we've really not understood how we deal with this thing called differentiation. The fact that we have a society which, because of our history, has resulted in very many different and complex challenges we have to deal with. Just take the simplest of all. With all these institutions under apartheid that we had, the result was that they defined the land separately. Now we come along and say, we're building housing over here, but actually there's 10 different state institutions that quote unquote own that land. So as a planner, I can't have a township establishment, which means even though we built the houses, we can't hand people titles. And now 15 years later, some people still don't have titles. They've got the house, they've got the water, they've got the electricity, etc., but we haven't given them titles. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of those this morning, but it's very good that both of them are here as well there, because even though I do have challenges with some of the approach that's being adopted, it's too World Bank oriented and it's failed in other parts of the world, aspects have failed, I do think, because water is not something that you can make profit out of. And that's why it's failed elsewhere, because once you have, as in the United States now, we have utility companies in water and electricity, and that's a failing country. Go to California and see how many rich people end up with having no electricity for weeks on end because they've allowed a profit-oriented company to come in and actually deal with that whole system. And of course, they haven't repaired and maintained. We know now how much we're not repairing and maintaining. We know how much we're not spending on capital, and I'll touch on those later. So thank you, and it's good being here, and I hope I'm slightly controversial. So we must agree on some things. And certainly if you look at it, the fact is that today, just look at the last 10 years or 12 years or whatever, we've gone from something like 73% of people having access to piped water to being about 82%. These are based on the census stats that you have. 60% had access to flush toilets, 71% today. 77% in formal dwellings 10 years ago, it's now 89%. Each of those are huge changes there. A system where we've delivered houses, and we'll touch on that in a minute, which other countries have not done. Not at certainly our middle income level, but I say to colleagues of mine in the United States, show me one house that has been given to a poor person by the state, not one house. And yes, it has challenges because those people often end up, as their economic situation improves, we end up not rating them. And we've got those challenges to deal with, but at least we're beginning to address those issues there. So we know there's a lot still to be done, but we've got to recognize that a lot has been done, a lot is happening. I keep saying that even in spite of the fact, and you'll see some stats in a minute, that we're not spending enough on capital, and I think Golani has indicated that we're not dealing with repairs and maintenance to the degree that we should. The fact is we're still spending more money at a municipal level on infrastructure, on public infrastructure, than national and provincial government are spending. Exclude the Transnets and that because they're really economic infrastructure there. But that is the reality. The fact is that this apartheid spatial imprint is still with us every day. And it creates challenges because now those informal settlements that start emerging in the 1980s, we're still living with them today. And now we have an even bigger problem because we're not delivering RDP or BNG housing, as it's called today, fast enough. The reality is that those poor people who are in informal settlements are now formalizing their housing. So now in the middle of an informal settlement, much like in India, you would find cheek by jowl, someone's actually now put a 2-story concrete house above their shack or built around their shack there. And then we get, as we had in Doornkop, that house collapsing because it was on dolomitic land, which is a serious issue. And I've just been finishing a report which will go to Cabinet dealing with collapsed buildings. And when you look at that, you realize the problem is as much the private sector, all these rich developers, as it is the state, who just doesn't have the capability in the local governments to make sure that we're managing those buildings. How do we deal with those issues? Because you've got a whole lot of people making a whole lot of money. When you look at the Ormond building collapse here, where 11 people died in an industrial building, and that owner of that building seems to have 60 or 70 equivalent buildings, not one of which has a record in the municipality of plans being passed. And yet we've got so-called professional engineers signing off plans which never got to the municipality, which never were able to deal with the kind of structural issues that we're dealing with there. So that's the challenge that we've got to begin to think about. And a lot of it comes back to this imprint that we have in our country. And yes, we've made marginal differences. Some black people are now living in the bourgeois areas of Sandton, and we've got some new settlements being built for black people. But the reality is we still have this spatial disjuncture, which even the World Bank recognizes in all their reports on South Africa. Solve that problem, and you'll begin to solve many of the other developmental challenges we have there. Look at Gauteng. This shows you, again, it's not an electoral map, but it just shows you if you take every ward in Johannesburg and look at, in each of those wards, the proportion in relative to the income that people have. So it's the mean income, the average income per ward versus the average income for Gauteng as a whole. This map's fascinating. It just shows you there's a whole ring of people around there who are poor, but yet they've got to get to these places where the workers are, where the work is. What do? Well, they might have a house out there, the one that apartheid put them in. They might have got a BNG house in Soweto, let's say, or part there, but it's still going to cost them 30, 40, 50 rand to catch a taxi each day. So 50% of what they're earning is going on transport. And then you realize that, no, they're building a shack somewhere. And then we come along and say, well, what do we do about those things? And yes, sometimes our solutions are too slow and not effective enough to deal with it there. So we've got to deal with the spatial, what I call injustice. And on the right-hand side, it's about unequal access to jobs and services, inaccessible communities and places. Parts of our cities have beautiful parks. Other parts of our cities have no parks, or where there is provision made for a park to be, people build up houses there. How do we begin to deal with that? How do we deal with unequal budgets? And I know Treasury often complains when I say these things, but the reality is we do have unequal budgets. They're starting to fix it a little bit now, but we're only getting about 8% of that national fiscus. Fights I was having in the 15, 20 years ago, saying we needed a national fund that deals with development, that municipalities could restructure the way they organize wastewater systems. You can't have an Alexandra here and a Sandton here, where actually you need a wastewater system that serves both places, but is completely new. You can't carry on just adding a little bit on the Sandton side and hoping that you'll solve the Alexandra side, because Alexandra has too many people relative to the way in which apartheid built that those pipes, etc., relative to what we deal with here. So you needed a national infrastructure fund, not one that sort of talks about segmented departments of water and electricity and sanitation, sewerage and public transport, because you forget about the parks, the places where children can be, the schools, the services that government needs to provide. You forget about those things when you segment us to say, oh, we'll fix this electricity, but then you don't have parks where people can enjoy themselves. So that's what we mean when we say that. And every day we've got to be thinking about what are the things we do there, and not be so much that every time we're pointing at another march down our streets, whether it's March on March today or whether it's March on March to kick out Mike Sutcliffe out of the city manager of Durban, whatever those marches are, we shouldn't be worrying as much about those. We've survived those for years, and that's what democracy is. So what's this thing that I call differentiation? Just look at that table there. If you take the 13 largest municipalities, so your 8, they're called metros, actually they're category A municipalities, and you add to it the other 5 largest municipalities, what you find is that they're about 47% of the population is there, but 51% of the households are there. That starts telling you that this issue that you have, where actually in Gauteng, over 30% of the households in Gauteng are one-person households. Quite often it's a person who does have a home somewhere else, but in fact they need to be close to a job here. So that starts telling you a challenge of these bigger cities relative to, in the more rural areas, the other 200 municipalities. And it always gets me when this Auditor General of ours always talks about the percentage with clean audits. I'm not a believer in clean audits. I think you can steal more money if you have a clean audit, because it means you know how the system works and you can deal with it, or you simply don't spend money. Look at all the clean audits that we have. All of them are small places. Ekurhuleni was a clean audit a year and a half ago, in the midst of what we're seeing in Matlanga today. Anyway, I don't want to get into that. It's too political. But look at that third figure on that. 70% of the taxable income in South Africa is coming from 13 of those. Because, again, of this big picture spatial disjuncture that we have. The rest of the country has 30% of the taxable income happening there. So yes, we might complain about the fact that we're spending a very high proportion of our national fiscus on social development issues, but the reality is in the short to medium term, that is a reality that we have, but we need to find some solutions for those. And I'm glad that the former agricultural fellow is sitting in the front audience and mixing up gender and Kulani versus Zolani and a few other things, but at least he's here, so get with your agriculture. So colleagues, when we talk about differentiation, it means we can't be imposing a single national solution and expect it's going to fix the whole country. And that's where I really disagree with friends of mine, and they're all friends of mine, even though we fight, in national government. Because the only thing I know about national government is that it's created what I call a compliant state. So most of the time, and it's nice seeing Mametsi sitting there, most of the time, the DDGs are spent complying because they're scared the auditor's going to come and then they might not be a clean audit anymore. They're not developmental. Because a developmental state means that you have competent people in the Auditor General's office who understand that you can't deliver services like we need to deliver in a compliant way. You cannot. What you need to be in, if you're developmental, is to recognize that you can't have solutions for every single situation that you have. You can't predict. How do you predict what will happen in the next year? But everyone lives with APPs, and you go and talk to my DDG friends here and say, do this. Oh, no. For this year, it's not in my APP. Well, forget about the APP. If it's important, do it. We suddenly find money when March on March have decided to march. But we're not doing that for developmental reasons. And we then start blaming municipalities or blaming provinces or blaming national for that. So differentiation becomes important. Look at the lower figure, which is from the latest census. It just shows you, in a sense, how different Cape Town, Gauteng, which has the largest number of migrants coming in, and mainly internal migrants, versus Cape Town. So if you look at those coming from outside South Africa to Gauteng, it's a smaller proportion compared to Cape Town, bigger proportion relatively there, which means you can't solve Cape Town and Johannesburg, which are big, well-resourced cities, can't solve them in the same way. So when I talk to the mayor of Cape Town, he's dealing with real issues around the fires that erupt in informal settlements, the need that you've got to deal with sanitation, the need you've got to deal with those kinds of things. Whereas here in Gauteng, the problems are quite different to deal with. Yes, you have some of those, but you don't have the scale of those kinds of fires that you get there and other things there. So the issue is we don't have integrated human settlements at the moment. And that's what worries me, because the more we end up with talking about electricity and water and sanitation without thinking of them as an integrated set of services that we need, what's happening at the moment is that people in Johannesburg now, because of some of the water problems you've had in some of the better suburbs here, so now we get our own water tanks, we fill them quickly. And what does that mean? Happens in eThekwini too. It means your whole water system gets disrupted, which now means that you need to know what each household is doing or each business is doing as they go off the electricity grid or off the water grid to begin to make sure that you can pull together and create this integrated framework here. Because the more the rich get out of the system, the more the system fails, because the people down the street who are in the rich areas, they still need to be serviced. But now you've got lots of air and water, and you know what air and water pipes does. It often means that if you've got poor infrastructure, it means you get bursts, and all sorts of other issues emerge there. So let's look quickly at the housing performance, given that you forced me to talk about that, so I better get talking there. So over the past, since mid-1990s, the number of BNG or RDP houses, as they call it, in other words, those houses that the state builds, either 40 square meters or 45 square meters, the performance has been, it's actually over 4 million houses have been built across the country. And now you have site and service schemes. You've got a whole range of things, but I thought I didn't want a complex slide on that. When you look at expenditure, though, on housing, and that's partly because even though the money that we're getting or the state is able to provide is there, relative to the building materials, which have gone up at a CPI that is much greater than that, it means you've got fewer houses being produced today than before. So I was pleased that when I was in eThekwini, not me, I take all the credit and I blame where there are problems, but I look at my teams, they were delivering at least 15,000 houses a year. eThekwini, if they deliver 1,000 houses, we congratulate them per year. And the demand is greater. And they're building them not where they should be. So now you've got people who were in temporary accommodation 5 years ago in a flood, and most of them have not been resettled or even given a piece of land somewhere where they can build their own houses. But the one down the bottom left there is the one that worries me the most. Because for me, in my level, I wasn't the CFO, if you're not spending money on your capital relative to your operations, you're going to find a problem in the future. And the result is we've gone from that 80-20 is, in my head, the best way to be. Now, in some of these big municipalities, you're 95% on operational and 5% on capital. So your first problem is that level. You're not investing in the kind of things I spoke about, of getting a sewage treatment plant that covers the whole of that northern suburb area, rather than these individual ones that we have that are breaking every so often. We've got to repair them, or we've got cracks in some of these reservoirs, etc. So that's the kind of problem that we end up with if we don't deal with it. But the second problem we have is that our whole model of housing is built around ownership. And it's not built around the reality is that people either rent and not pay rent, or they're renting. And those are the figures that show us that very well. So we've got to begin to, and thankfully Operation Funhlelo, which we'll talk about in half a minute, tries to think through those issues. I still think that they're too Johannesburg or Gauteng centered, but we find that generally in the country. many of the people live here. And so we don't think through what the realities in that differentiated context are. So Operation Vulindlela, you might know of it, but it's something that was established by the presidency to look at specific issues and say, how do we solve them? Well, there's solutions to deal with particularly affordable housing and correct this imbalance. They're suggesting 5 things, and I agree with them largely at that level. You've got to deal with bringing back passenger rail services, because that's the only way you can move people at a commuter level on scale, and then you manage your buses and you manage your taxis. So if you know eThekwini, we extended the rail line from KwaMashu into Inanda, for example. But when we built that center, which was dividing people of Indian origin from African origin from the shack settlements of Inanda, we built a shopping center there that would make sure the train comes in there, the buses go above it, and the taxis above that. So it means that slowly you get, it's difficult because you're dealing with mafia at times, but that's why I sent 30 warlords to Colombia from the taxi industry. And I said, go and see how they've transformed their industry there. And it was really interesting because they'd never been out the country. Those taxi owners came back with a very different understanding, is realizing transport is not about taxis and how much money you make, because that means you have cheaper drivers, driving faster, more accidents. But if you think of the transport industry, that if I owned the shops around my taxi rank and built them, and the toilets were good, etc., people will come here and I become part of a taxi industry there. And so unless we're doing that, beginning to make sure that we sort out how the rails, commuter rails I'm talking about, and some of that's happening. You're starting to see in parts of our country, we're reopening railway lines that for the last 10 years we didn't use there. Tough, but we'll do it. Secondly, we've got to improve this demand-side housing policy to support densification. This NIMBY mentality, not in my backyard, is crazy. You know, I mean, we're building all these golfing estates, sucking up water. Now in Cape Town, I see they want to put one of these new data centers on an old golf course. It's absurd. I mean, do we look at how much Google sucks in terms of electricity and water? And we want to just continue that here in a water-scarce country. Anyway, I hope that's getting sorted out separately. But we've got to address these housing programs so that they do deal with affordable housing where people can walk or cycle or be closer to places of opportunity and work there. And there's no evidence that shows that your property values go down because we've got poorer people living near you. I know it because my property value is not going up, but where I live on the beachfront, about 200 people who live on the street around me, and I've known them for 20 years. And certainly the property values stay the same, even though people say, oh, you know, all those people living on the streets. But the reality is they'll live there, and eventually, as the port improves its efficiency, they will find better accommodation there. We've got to release public land and buildings for affordable housing and other developments there. And certainly the minister, I think if you listen to Minister McPherson, almost every speech he's giving now is we've got to reform what was called the PMT, the Property Management Trading Entity within Public Works, to make sure that those properties that are owned, we can isolate which of those could be better managed, not necessarily sold to the private sector, but managed, and those that also can be released for human settlements. And we've got to do that quickly and as quickly as possible, because the more we get that, the more you're going to deal with this disjuncture that I spoke about earlier. Deal with the issue of backlog of title deeds. Again, because of this compliance state, I don't know how many times for the past 10 years I've been harassing, I'll use a calm word there, ministers and DGs of the relevant departments. There are simple ways. A person I know and a friend of mine I've worked with for years, he's delivering 60,000 title deeds every month, not to South Africa, because you've got a bunch of people who are sitting in offices here saying, oh, no, it's a Rolls-Royce title deed we want. And even in a place like Zimbabwe, you're delivering more at that level because as you use technology, you can employ people, you can give people access to a title without worrying about all these other things that you have to go through in order to get a title deed there. And once you give people a title, it means they've got something that's bankable. Once they've got something that's bankable, they then begin to realize the value of the position they have, and they're going to improve on it. But equally, they can now begin to do. And in rural areas in particular, that's hugely important. If you're a person who wants to grow vegetables, but you don't have a title, you're not going to improve anything. You can't buy a bucket to get it to the shops, etc., the markets. So that title deed issue has to be dealt with properly. It's not being dealt with now. We've got a few thousand that we hand out every week, and that's not enough. And then land use, building, and other regulations to enable low-cost housing development is absolutely critical. This work that I was doing with Ron Watermeyer, who's one of South Africa's best structural engineering experts, it absolutely came up to us. The building regulations need to be dealt with. Our professionals need to be sorted out, because an engineer is not a structural engineer. If you go to the UK, engineers have about 50 different certifications they get. But here, we've had collapsed buildings with engineers signing them off, not submitting to council, of course, but they're not competent to do that. They're not certified. So we've got to deal with how we certify people who are professionals there. It's not enough there. Firstly, we've got to at least get people professionals. One of the municipalities I deal with, I won't mention with, it's just absurd. Appoint a head of engineering department who's not competent for the job. And what's even worse, there's now a court case or charges that have been laid against a person on the panel who forged a signature of an outside professor who was on that panel. Now, that's the problem that you have in trying to build that capacity in municipalities there. So there's a set of proposals, I've probably spoken too much, that Vulindlela is dealing with. And they're good proposals, and some of them are test cases of how we actually get more private sector involvement in particularly the rental housing markets. And that's a good thing that we need to do. So you broaden the range there of people who get involved. You change the way in which subsidies work. So these are some of the things being tested here, and you can read the slides when they get sent to you. The challenge I have is that you've got to be differentiated. You've got to allow local capacity to operate. We've got the laws that we need there. Our laws say at the moment that you can give to ward committees responsibility even for some of the planning functions. And I don't mind if a particular ward says that you can't have within 200 meters a place selling liquor around a school. I don't mind if that's it. But at least start decentralizing and involve communities in things that government can do. This belief now that South Africans have that government can do everything is completely misplaced, and we've got to begin to change that view. We've got to also build sustainability. So this is just showing you two examples of capital expenditure of the rough proportions that were spent 10 years ago. But the striking thing is, if you look at this R&M, the expenditure on repairs and maintenance, for example, 10 years ago, we were spending 1% of PPE. You should be spending 7 to 10% of PPE if you're going to be repair and maintain what you've got, because you're also building more. So you've got to deal with that. And unless we deal with that and start interrogating, why is it that Johannesburg, the city with the biggest budget in South Africa, still has a PPE out? The last time I looked, it was probably 2 to 3%. It's fine if your operational expenditure is so high, but then spend it on the things you should be spending it on instead of insourcing security or whatever you're doing there. It's just, and get rid of these entities. I've always argued against them with my friends in Johannesburg. All these entities that you have in Johannesburg is crazy. And that's why the situation of ring fencing, you can do it. We did it in eThekwini. Cape Town, to a certain extent, does that as well. So you can do it without creating a whole bunch of entities around here. Overall, my last slide then is to be smart. Number one, we must be much more specific in our plans. There's too many of these things, high level, do this, rather than saying this is what we can do and this is what we can't do here. We've got to be measurable. And that's where I certainly applaud Treasury, because they've gone as far as they can. COGTA have not got to that same level, because you would want a balance, and that's part of the challenge we have in a country where you've got a very strong Treasury. Hopefully it's not being recorded. I'll never get work for either of them again. But the reality is you've got this Treasury who goes like a bulldozer down the road, and you've got a COGTA that does huge amounts. I keep saying to them, all these reports and questions to Parliament, etc., should also be on their website. So when you begin to look at the governance reports, You don't deal with its service delivery in general. What is it about service delivery that has meant that this municipality is not doing whatever they do? And that's the challenge that we have, is to build both those institutions who are the key institutions, and then you have your service delivery ones like water and energy, etc. We've got to focus on what is achievable. And South Africans, there's too much of this idealism. Change the law, change the constitution, or whatever. All of that's fine. Yes, our regulations could be improved upon. Yes, some aspects of laws need to be changed, but let's not wait until they are. I don't believe you should regulate coalitions, for example. It'll take us, Germany, it took them 50 to 60 years before they have the system that they've got in place now of coalitions, as far as I remember, something like that. So we've got to find a way that we don't spend so much time on things that we don't have to do, but focus, in fact, on what is achievable there. Must be more developmental. It's my big complaint the whole time when I hear the Auditor General going to Parliament. No other country in the world treats the Auditor General like they're the president of the country. Nowhere. Now we have this thing called clean audits. And I say, where do you have clean audits in the world? And look at who's a clean audit. And I can tell you many of those municipalities that I work on, I might not work with them, I know are not developmental at all. We've got to make sure that we focus on what is it that we want to develop and how do we develop it. And then be time bound. Because at times we say we must do this, and then we don't do it. And these poor people have to sign APPs every year. I remember in one of the provinces we were working in, they've employed people and so have got their racial statistics up, but now they've employed a lot of black men as an example. And now the politicians are saying, no, but you must have 40% women. I said, well, do we now fire the people that we've just hired? We've got to begin to think about these things and the implications of them, rather than now blaming the poor administrators for it. But thank you. I hope I've thrown up a few things.
Thank you. Thank you very much for a hard-hitting message. I was actually quite impressed with the way you explained the term smart. My wife usually tells me I must be smart, and I never knew it actually means that. But be it as it may, the interesting thing is I visited Polokwane a few weeks ago, and then traveling from Polokwane to Zanin. And I was just dumbstruck by what's happening between Polokwane and Zanin. And I came to the conclusion that maybe we run parallel economies in this country. On the one hand, you've got the PTY economy with strict rules, compliance, and tax compliance, and all kinds of levies and taxes that impose such a massive burden on people that they can hardly build a house, or they can hardly, start a business. That's the PTY economy for you. And then as part of the PTY economy, to soothe our conscience, we build these RDP houses. And I've often asked myself, why do we do this? Because it's a tick box exercise. We build these little matchboxes for people, and then we can say we have delivered houses. Yes, you've delivered a place to live in, but you haven't delivered a community. And that ties in with what Dr. Sutcliffe's core argument is, developmental in nature. We need to start developing communities as opposed to just fulfilling a constitutional mandate. And then my biggest discovery is that within this parallel community or economy that's developing, the PTO economy, permission to occupy, I've never seen something like that. It's castles that go up. It's businesses that go up. It's safe communities. That's the interesting part. And then there's an entire community life centered around, or within that PTO economy. And I ask myself, where are we missing the boat in terms of this message from the top that seeks to centralize everything, where people just say, but sorry, we are not going to be bothered and be impeded by, what you want us to do. We will do our own thing. And somehow between these two systems, PTY, PTO economies, there's maybe a solution that we must start to think of. And I think Dr. Sutcliffe touch on these elements. But I think it requires much more deeper thought to really understand what is happening within these different spaces. Ladies and gentlemen, we are nice and early. I don't want you to leave because there's some very, very exciting speakers that will also speak after the tea break. It's now 10:25. May I ask that we perhaps give you an half an hour, say until 11 o'clock, to enjoy tea, to meet friends, shake hands, and also talk about possible solutions for local governments. And then we be back here at 11. Thank you very much. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, just again, thank you to all of our previous speakers. I think they've highlighted very, very important elements of local government, finance, secondly, water delivery, and then thirdly, housing. We will now be continuing with the program, and I just want to welcome Ms. Mametsi Masemola, and she's the head of infrastructure at South Africa. She will talk to engineering for people, how to build resilient municipal infrastructure that delivers. I've neglected to also welcome our online viewers. I've just watched this morning, and there's quite a number of people that are also watching the proceedings from home or from office, wherever. So welcome to you also. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Program Director Christo. Good morning, everyone in the room and those people that are joining us online. My name is Mametsi Masemola. As indicated, I'm currently the head of Infrastructure South Africa. I have been with this organization since its inception. We have evolved from being the Infrastructure and Investment Office in the Office of the President in 2020, and we were officially established as Infrastructure South Africa in September of 2021. So I'll talk a little bit about our mandate, what we do, our programs, etc. I was told that I just need to click and everything else will be enabled. There we go. So I'll talk a little bit about our programs. I'll talk about our legal mandate, or where we derive our power to do the kind of work that we're doing at the moment. We'll talk a little bit about municipal infrastructure and what we see as the current realities. And it's almost the same things that are coming out of the presentation by DDG Ohalaletseng from National Treasury, as well as DDG Kolani from DWS, and some of the issues that were raised or coming out of the presentation by Dr. Sutcliffe, and what is required for what we call a step change in closing that infrastructure investment gap, ensuring that these projects that are being prepared and packaged actually go over the line, and the type of work that we do in that regard, and as well as some concluding remarks. So as mentioned, we were established just under 5 years ago. Our mandate is essentially to close the infrastructure investment gap and to focus on high value, high impact infrastructure investments. And currently we're the only institution that actually supports both public sector led and private sector led infrastructure investments. Our pipeline is actually reflecting that. So the National Development Plan says that by 2030, 30% of South Africa's GDP must come from infrastructure investments, what they call gross fixed capital formation. And it goes further. It says that 2/3 of that infrastructure investment must come from the private sector, and only 1/3 must be driven by the public sector. So we've got that twin goal of supporting the projects that the private sector is embarking on, but also ensuring that these major government infrastructure projects also go or are achieved or are implemented. So we do project preparation. That is our core business. We are the center of excellence when it comes to project preparation. We get our funding from National Treasury. So we get 600 million rand over the MTF to prepare and package high value, high impact infrastructure projects. We are also, by law, required to develop what they call the National Infrastructure Plan. We do have that now. It's cabinet approved 2 years ago. It's called National Infrastructure Plan 2050. And to just ensure that those alignment issues, as you conceive of a project, and when you develop that project, that there is coherence and alignment, through the three spheres of government, et cetera, et cetera. So we make sure that those things are being done. And one of our core business is actually around institutional and regulatory unblockings. You'll be surprised to know how many licenses, permits, authorizations that are required to get the project off the ground, from environmental authorizations, water use licenses. All of those things need to be in place for a project to be implemented. And so by law, we are empowered to actually work with the relevant institutions of government, whether it's DWS, Tate Xolani, on your side, on the WULAS, is the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment on environmental authorizations, is your Civil Aviation Authority, is your Department of Transport, is your South African National Defence Force. You actually need, for IPPs, they require a letter of no objection, for example, from the Department of Defence Force. And then, of course, we do investment mobilization. So we are not a financing institution. We work with the likes of National Treasury. We work with institutions like IFISA. We work with local and international financing institutions, development financing institutions on mobilizing capital to finance or fund these government projects. And then, of course, we do what we call benefits realization. We monitor the implementation of these projects. They are called strategic integrated projects. We monitor their implementation. We report on them. We also, once the asset has been delivered on the ground, 3-4 years later, we should be able to then quantify the benefits that arose out of that asset being implemented. So our legal framework or mandate is coming out of a piece of legislation called the Infrastructure Development Act. So this act was promulgated in 2014. What it does is that it provides for the minister responsible for the implementation of this act to develop a national infrastructure plan, not national development plan, national infrastructure plan 2050. As mentioned, this is already done. We had phase 1, which focused on network industries, so freight, transport, logistics, water and sanitation, electricity and energy, as well as ICT infrastructure, what we call digital communications infrastructure. And then phase 2 focused on distributed infrastructure, so human settlement, and then municipalities. And in terms of municipalities, we focused on trading services, energy, electricity, water and sanitation, as well as waste management. And we also focus on a lot more on strengthening institutional capacity to be able to deliver on these projects. A lot of emphasis came through the previous presentations around building a capable state and actually building trust, making sure that we have institutions that are robust, institutions that are able to get these projects implemented on time and on budget. And then, of course, we focus on supporting certain institutions, some municipalities on project delivery. We are a team of 39 people. So that's the whole of Infrastructure South Africa. So the mandate is this big. The institution is this small. We're punching above our weight, but we get certain things done and done properly. And our budget is, operations budget is 106 million rand. And then, of course, the big chunk is the project preparation facility, which is 600 million rand per year. Similar to what Dr. Sutcliffe was talking about, so it's not all doom and gloom. Ordinarily we see these service delivery challenges, the potholes, the water not running out of taps, and so on. But there is some good work that's beginning to come out of the pipeline of projects that we are focusing on as Infrastructure South Africa. So we are deploying 88 million rand of our budget to support some of these projects that you see on the screen. One of them I just want to highlight is Machabeng, a local municipality project. So we did feasibility studies for this project. So the municipality is looking to replace 1,700 kilometers of piped water in the municipality because there are asbestos pipes and they were built 40 years ago and so on. Obviously, the infrastructure is aging. The non-revenue water losses are extremely high. The municipality owes Eskom. It owes also the water authority there. But on the strength of the business case that we developed, we've already unlocked 800 million rand from the Development Bank of Southern Africa. Even before we take this project to the National Treasury's budget facility for infrastructure. So it's possible that when you plan and prepare a project, you satisfy the 5 cases. What is the strategic case for this project? Conducting your, developing your cost-benefit analysis, those budget statements that are required by National Treasury, the commercial case, the financial case, looking at the institutional capacity of this municipality to implement this project, etc. That's quite important. And once the funding institutions see that, they say there is now, this is the project that we can back. But the municipality on its own will not be able to get this done. We know that for a fact because they've been going to National Treasury on the same project for 4 years in succession, and it was not approved. So Enter Infrastructure South Africa were able to change the game essentially. These are some of the projects that are currently undergoing project preparation. DDG Kolan in the morning spoke about some of these municipalities that are now charged or criminally charged and they have been taken to court and so on. One of them is the city of Tshwane on this Rooival wastewater treatment plant because they're discharging sewage, polluted water into some Orange River, and so on. And the department took them to court, etc. But we can't bury our heads in the sand and say they'll see to finish. So we've stepped in. We've prepared this project. We've done all the preparatory work. We are working closely with the Water Partnership Office. We've now actually handed over that project. They are preparing it now as a PPP, and then it will hopefully obtain all those TA1, TA2, TA3 National Treasury approvals, and this project can then unlock both fiscal allocations as well as financing from the private sector, meaning DFIs and so on. So these are some of these projects that we're looking at from a water perspective. We thought that because there's a presentation about water, we only focus on the water projects in the Infrastructure South Africa space. I must tell you that there is even a longer list behind this. We've got about another 37 or so of these projects, but because of our funding envelope is so limited, those are the ones that we term orange list because there's a green list. The green list is these ones. And then there's the orange list. And the work that we do is as follows. So our argument is we always say this, that a project ticks all the right boxes does not necessarily mean it's the right project to embark on. And it's the right projects to support, and it's the right project in the right area. And so we have developed an economic model. We just call it input-output model, but it's quite sophisticated. We don't use consultants for that. It's in-house, where we funnel these projects. So based on the data that they have, we put it in that model, and we can see to what extent this project is contributing or will contribute to GDP impact, to what extent this project will contribute to job creation, to what extent this project will contribute to socio-economic objectives in that whole space. Is it aligned with economic corridors, development corridors, etc., etc.? And that's how we come up with these projects that we then support based on the funding envelope from an ISA perspective. And so over time, even those 37 that we have, in the next phase, we onboard certain ones, etc., so that you've got a lot more, you've got a project pipeline that's robust, that's comprehensive, that's believable every single year that you build that infrastructure pipeline. These are some of the current realities that we see ourselves working with municipalities so far, and they align exactly with the issues that have been raised earlier in the morning in terms of other presentations. Institutional and governance challenges are, I think, more pronounced with some of these municipalities that we've been working on. There's one municipality in Northwest. In a year, they've had 4 municipal managers and 2 chief financial officers. Even ourselves as ISA, we had to step out and step back to say, until there is some level of stability in terms of the interface between the political office and the administration, is just a space we can't enter, because once decisions are made, they are not carried through when there's a change within that municipality. And once there is that inconsistency, it's very difficult for us we're not turnaround specialists for municipalities, so we can only work as hard and as fast as the capacity of the municipality and the consistency of the leadership, and because we must build institutional capacity and institutional competence in those municipalities. Planning and project development challenges, absolutely. And it's not only in municipalities, but it's also across government, even in some state-owned entities. The erosion of financial and technical engineering capacity, just the ability to conceive of projects, to develop these projects, to spec them correctly, to go out on procurement event, onboard a proper service provider, manage the contract, and deliver on the asset. Those skill sets have long left government. Or it has been, we've been hollowed out, we must say, because of different reasons. But some of them is that just the environment in public sector sometimes can become untenable for these specialists. And also we are competing with other regions outside of South Africa, where they've got much more sexy projects, complex engineering projects. So they are very attractive to go and work in GCC countries, for example. And so we find that there is that issue. The issues around misalignment of planning priorities and with regards to resources and so on, we know that's very much a challenge. I think it was DDG National Treasury that spoke at length around this fiscal sustainability issues. We will not spend a lot more time on that. Adoption of unfunded mandates or budgets, high levels of fruitless, wasteful, and irregular expenditure, declining revenue collection, and so on. We know that those are challenges within the municipality, but there are ways in which those can be resolved. And the Machabeng case study it shows that this is something that can be managed when we start working with the municipality in developing a business case for a specific project. We know that there are growing infrastructure backlogs. We know that the 1 trillion rand that the Minister of Finance has made available over the next 3 years for capital projects in the main is going to on the maintenance of the current infrastructure assets, the rehabilitation of the current infrastructure assets, the rebuilding of railway lines, and so on. Those had existed before. We are not building anything new, we're simply rehabilitating those. So if you look at what the baseline infrastructure levels are and where we need to be as the country by 2050, that infrastructure investment gap will increase if we don't do something. If we don't prepare and package projects that can attract financing outside of what the fiscal envelope can accommodate. And so our view, or in fact our mandate, is that we will work on these projects that can mobilize private capital. And so in order for us to close that infrastructure investment gap, because the declining asset performance and all of those things, that's what municipalities are seized with now. They can't even think about building new stuff when the current infrastructure backlog and the maintenance of that infrastructure is under so much pressure. This is one of the slides we like to use on the work that was done by the World Bank and National Treasury. Dr. Sutcliffe, don't look at my direction when I mention the World Bank. So I'll look this side, I'll look this way. So this slide basically shows you that there's now an inverse relationship between good governance and the performance of the infrastructure budget, essentially. That it converged literally around the 2007, 2008, 2009 period, and that was the period that led to the biggest project in this country, being the delivery of the FIFA World Cup. And that was also the era where we had the highest gross fixed capital formation in South Africa, because both the private sector and the public sector were concerned with one thing, one project, the delivery of the FIFA World Cup in South Africa. We needed to build new stadia, we needed to build new broadband infrastructure, and. And so, and then afterwards, you can see the divergence of the two lines. So which means that although there is the ramp up of infrastructure expenditure, the quality of that spend, there is no correlation. We did one of the things that we do in our space. We've got the Center of Excellence. We do some research work around many different things. We just concluded the Construction Development Index. So we looked at labor and capital productivity, and we layered it with different other information and data sets. And we now know, and in fact, that work shows that we, as South Africa, we experienced the highest levels of productivity in terms of the construction sector in 2004 and 5, those 2 years. So from a productivity perspective, we are below the 2004-2005 period. This is one of the heat maps that we also produce, but this one tracks gross fixed capital formation. So Dr. Sutcliffe is correct. He's saying that we need to, when we plan for infrastructure, we need to be able to undermine the traditional apartheid special patterns in terms of infrastructure investment in this case. So where you see the dark greens and light greens, it means over the last 15 years or so, this is where these are the regions that experience highest levels of infrastructure investment. Where you see the dark reds, the orange, and so on, less infrastructure investment. So not only do you have disparities between the provinces, but you also have disparities within provinces. The Western Cape, where we are experiencing the highest levels of infrastructure investment, is the city of Cape Town. Not much else in the province. Gauteng is different because it's a city region. So because you've got different metros sitting here in Gauteng, so the shades are a little bit different. And if you look at KZN, that highest concentration is Ekurhuleni municipality. So our work, when we talk about funneling and being able to prioritize which of these projects will be important, one of the things that we overlay that model with is the National Spatial Development Framework, so that we were able to address these spatial inequalities insofar as investments in the country are concerned. So in terms of this section of the presentation, look, as mentioned, we are not a specialist in terms of turning around dysfunctional municipalities and so on and so forth. So our focus in terms of this section of the report is something that aligns with our own mandate as Infrastructure South Africa, where we believe we can add a lot of value and also discharge our mandate as per the Infrastructure Development Act. The key focus is on infrastructure planning. We know that the statistics show that 80% of major government projects fail to reach financial close, to get into procurement. Sometimes even if it gets into procurement, those contracts are, that procurement processes, tenders are cancelled, etc., etc. For us, it's a function of poor preparation and packaging, because we can reduce delivery risks upfront of the upstream of the value chain by really focusing on project preparation. And so we do all the technical feasibility studies, the geotech reports, engineering designs, cost-benefit analysis, environmental authorizations work, applications, all of that upfront, and determine also the funding pathway for these projects. Where is the money going to come from? So we can't get political principals standing up on a podium to announce a project, but we don't actually know where is that funding going to come from, because we know essentially there could be a strategic case for that project to happen, but if we didn't do all of this upfront, we know that those projects are likely to run into difficulties. And so on our side, strengthening project preparation is key on getting these projects to at least have a better prospects of success for these major government projects. Building institutional capacity, absolutely. And so we work with other institutions in relation to this. Again, we're a very small program currently. And so the development of these projects, as we build these business cases, we work hand in glove with the project owner. They are not a bystander. They are not an inactive participant. They are an active, proactive participant in the entire process. And then where possible, we also bring in training programs that are delivered by the institutions like National Treasury and the DBSA, Development Bank of Southern Africa, and others, as part of building this institutional capacity. Over time, we believe that there will be some fruits that there will be major benefits in relation to this. But our focus is again on improving infrastructure planning, the implementation of these projects, and then of course the long-term asset management. Issues around unlocking sustainable investment is quite key. What we know for sure is that if you look at the number of infrastructure projects that a municipality wants to embark on, or a provincial government department or state-owned entity, etc., we know that from their own balance sheet or from their own fiscal allocation, they will never be able to meet that need. So we have to find a way in which we package these projects such that they can unlock other sources of funding. So let me give this example about the work that we did for the Eastern Cape and Northern Cape schools program. So we were mandated by cabinet to say, there's a major backlogs in relation to schools infrastructure in these two provinces. Can we prepare a business case for these two provinces? So our computation shows that, that government works in 3-year cycles, right? So there's a budget allocated for 3 years. If you look at the number of schools that are not meeting the norms and standards of the Department of Basic Education, which means they've got inappropriate schools infrastructure. You look at the migration of people and so on, where we need to be building new schools, and those schools that needs to be refurbished, etc. We will require something in the region of 48 billion rand just for these two provinces alone. But if you look at this 3-year cycle of funding, it will take us around 60 years just to address that. So you need a mechanism that front loads funding now from different sources in order to address that backlog and the building of new schools infrastructure, and to make sure that the current ones that are non-compliant are actually compliant now in the next 6 to 8 years. But you can only do that when you inject additional fiscal, additional financing into the mix. And then we do what we call a pledging or front loading. So the future allocations in 2029, 2035, 2040, those future allocations are now seeded to this financing, like a SPV, that puts the money up front in order to address that school's backlog. So that business case is now being submitted to National Treasury, and it was on the back of the reforms that National Treasury instituted. And so they have Treasury amended what they call the Division of Revenue Act, the DORA. For the first time, I think 3.5 years ago, it now provides for municipal provinces to actually borrow against future allocations. That power never rested with provinces, only municipalities had that. So we are exploiting that provision to make a test case for these for this infrastructure program for the two provinces. And if we succeed, you are like, we can then scale that to include other types of social infrastructure. So we wait to see what the outcome of that application is. And of course, this my last slide is on embracing innovation for service delivery. So there's one municipality we worked with in Free State, is part of our Adopt a Municipality pilot program. Their landfill site has reached the end of life. I mean, there's just nowhere else to now dump waste. And their original thinking was that they need land. And we do the same thing that we did. We just find land, and then we start dumping waste in that land. And our preparation work, we're saying, no, actually, we need to think about this differently. We must build a facility that, and for all of us sitting here, it's like obvious things. It's like, but they could have thought about this themselves. Why did they need infrastructure South Africa to tell them that? So one of the things we're doing in the preparation of that particular project is that we need to be thinking about building a facility, which this is normal in other countries, where we sort and burn this incinerate waste to generate electricity. You can also have other byproducts where you can, manufacture, like bricks and so on and so forth. So suddenly, your waste management project has got now potential additional revenue streams for the municipality itself. But we can't do things the same way that we've always done, and hope for different results. And so that's the type of thinking and innovation that we're also bringing in this space, at least on the projects that we are working with or working on. And suddenly they become more attractive. You now can have, you can trigger, grant funding on some of these climate funds, green economy initiatives, and funding that is free, that suddenly you can now unlock on the back of the type of project that we are now preparing and packaging, because it hits all the right notes in terms of environmental friendliness, climate issues, etc., etc. And so that's the type of work that we're bringing in the space on the projects that sit with Infrastructure South Africa. And on that note, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for a very powerful and a very insightful presentation. It's certainly appreciated. But I, was wondering, with all the things that you want to do, that you're pretty understaffed, 25 people. And I thought to myself, if I look at this room, people from various spheres of life, here's an entire network of people that you can tap into. And I think that's the purpose of Infrastructure South Africa. Invite all the expertise. This country, there's no shortage of expertise. And you highlight, a very serious challenge in terms of corruption, unethical people, and people that lack vision. Here, people sit. And not only here, but out there, there are literally thousands of people that will be willing to take hands with Infrastructure South Africa to help resolve the issues in this country. Just be careful, I don't want to talk about family business, but I had a chap coming to visit my sister, and he told us that he's an engineer and brought stacks of engineering books to impress us. And my father was also slightly impressed. And me coming from the West Coast, where we only speak Afrikaans, all these books were in English, so I hardly understood what was written there. Just to realize he was bullshitting us. So be careful of the guys with the books. So on that note, Mr. Papas, I've been following you for the time that you've been in that position. And I want you to come and share that beautiful story of yours. Welcome.
Hey, you guys even airbrushed me. That's luck, man. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for having me here today. Just as a very brief introduction, my name is Chris Papas. I'm 34 years old, 35 next month. I'll give you my address for birthday presents. I am the mayor of the Umgeni local municipality, a contract employee whose contract ends in 98 days' time. Please register to vote. I've been involved in politics since 2010. Politics, another word for that is community management, resource mobilization, temporary complaint center, and decision maker. So that is politics for you. And since 2010, I joined COPE as a political party back then. I'm now a member of the Democratic Alliance. And by ideology, I am a social democrat. Where is Umgeni Municipality? Umgeni Municipality is a small municipality. We are about 130th in terms of size in the country, so not eThekwini by a long shot. We are 105,000 people, a budget of 650 million rand, 1.3 billion rands worth of assets, 280 employees. The biggest challenges are electricity theft, skills shortages, modernization, and I'm proud to say that we are paid up with Eskom and our Water Services Authority. That is my budget speech. That won't help. All right. There we go. I thought it might be nice to share as well that we are also the home of the Nelson Mandela Capture Site. So I thought it was quite fitting to share the beautiful monument that is in the Mgeni municipality. It doesn't make my opposition too happy to know that both Robben Island and the Nelson Mandela Capture Site are both not in their hands. So I make sure that we keep it like that. All right. I have prepared a speech today because I'm from a very small rural town, and coming to big cities like this, even though we have more working streetlights and robots, is quite intimidating. So you'll forgive me for reading my speech today. I hope that it is insightful. There was a lot that I could have covered, but I've tried to focus in on a couple of things that I thought might be interesting for you, but also hopefully lead to progressive local government. Just as a disclaimer, can I just get an indication? Anyone here from the media? Anyone from the media? Hands up. There's some familiar faces here, skellums. Anyone here from local government sphere? All right, there's a couple. Politicians, yeah, a couple here. Public servants and other spheres of government. Lekker, okay. Just so I can tailor it properly. Can't say too many things when the oaks at the back there are sitting there watching. I'm joking. It's a pleasure to be with you today to discuss what I believe is one of the most important questions facing our country at this particular time. Those of us who serve in municipalities occupy a unique position in government. We are a sphere of government that citizens encounter every single day. While national government may determine policy and provincial government may provide oversight and support, local government is where people experience government and it is tangible. It is where people determine whether or not democracy is working. Residents don't judge us by the number of reports we submit or by the number of committee meetings we attend. They judge us by whether or not their refuse collected on time. They judge us by whether or not the streetlights work, the potholes repaired, the water runs, and whether the municipality is able to create an environment for jobs to be created. So I thought it important today to begin with a simple but important question. Has the ever-increasing regulation of local government actually made local government better? Has it reduced corruption? Has it reduced fraud? Has it reduced maladministration? Has it improved service delivery? Has it made municipalities more responsive, more innovative, and more capable? Or have we unintentionally created systems that consume enormous amounts of time and resources while delivering only marginal improvements in governance? Just to be clear, this is not an argument against accountability, and it's not an argument against transparency or oversight. These principles remain fundamental to good governance. Rather, today, I want to put an argument forward that more than 2 decades later of continuously adding legislation, regulations, circulars, reporting requirements, and approval processes, we should pause, honestly, and evaluate whether these interventions are achieving the outcomes that they were intended to achieve. Government, like any organization, should continuously evaluate whether the systems are producing better results. Unfortunately, we seldom do that in South Africa. We have developed what I described as a regulatory ratchet. Every scandal results in another regulation. Every government failure results in another reporting requirement. Every procurement irregularity produces another layer of compliance. What almost never happens is the reverse. We rarely ask whether an existing regulation is still necessary. We almost never remove outdated procedures, and we seldom simplify systems that have become unnecessarily complex. As a result, regulation accumulates year after year. Every new regulation adds to the previous one until eventually municipalities find themselves spending enormous amounts of time administering governance rather than delivering services. The question we should continually ask ourselves is not simply whether regulation exists, but whether it has measurable, improved outcomes. If it is, we should strengthen it. If it is not, we should have the courage to reform it. I'd like to explore this through three simple things that a municipality deals with on a daily basis: procurement, recruitment, and decision making. As I said, there are many of things that I could cover even within these topics, but I wanted to focus on these. So the first is supply chain management. And I'm glad that I followed Infrastructure South Africa, because a lot of your talk was about project packaging and capacity. Nobody disputes the importance of transparent procurement. Public money belongs to the public. Every rand spent by a municipality must withstand scrutiny. Corruption has robbed too many of us and too many of our communities of opportunities, infrastructure, and broken down trust. Robust procurement systems are therefore essential. But there's an important distinction between protecting public money and creating procurement systems that become so cumbersome that they undermine the very services that they were designed to deliver. Today, a single municipal tender can pass through multiple committees before it even begins, and even then it is most likely going to fail or start again. Specifications are drafted, considered, and approved. Specification committee meets. It goes to the evaluation committee that examines those submissions. It then goes to the adjudication committee that looks at the recommendations and passes them on to the accounting officer, who finally then awards it. But along the way, there are legal reviews, financial reviews, declarations, tax compliance, verifications, municipal certification, BEE requirements, and numerous other procedural requirements. Of course, each of these layers is rational when viewed individually, but collectively, they have created extraordinary complexity in local government. Some procurement files consist of thousands and thousands of pages. Now imagine the time required to simply read one tender properly. Now consider that every committee member must review those documents, and every committee must review those documents, often falling on top of the other responsibilities that they have as government officials. Multiply that across hundreds of procurement processes across many municipalities across the country, and you begin to understand why services are not delivered. It's because time in government is rarely treated as a cost, yet every delay carries a price. Infrastructure deteriorates while procurement is underway. Construction costs increase, equipment prices change, communities continue to wait for services. And of course, economic opportunities are then postponed. Perhaps the greatest irony is that despite increasingly sophisticated procurement regulations, corruption has not disappeared. Dishonest people adapt. Complexity in itself is not an effective anti-corruption strategy. In fact, complexity often favors those who understand how to manipulate the system while making life significantly more difficult for those who honestly want to work within it. One of the consequences that concerns me the most is the growing reluctance of original equipment manufacturers to deal directly with municipalities. Many manufacturers simply no longer view government as an attractive customer. The procurement cycles are too long, the administrative burden is too great, the uncertainty surrounding awards is too high. Payment periods remain unpredictable. Instead of dealing directly with municipalities, manufacturers are increasingly relying on intermediaries to avoid the public sector altogether. This has significant consequences, ladies and gentlemen. When original manufacturers withdraw from direct participation, municipalities often purchase the same products through intermediaries at higher prices. The taxpayer ultimately pays the price. We see exactly the same trend among local businesses and small municipalities. We all speak passionately about supporting local economic development, yet many local suppliers have quickly walked away from municipal procurement because they simply cannot justify the administrative burden. For a small engineering company or local builder or specialist supplier, preparing a tender submission can require considerable time and expense, with no certainty of success. Delays in adjudication create cash flow pressures, lengthy payment cycles create uncertainty. So many business owners decide that their energy is better invested elsewhere. So who then remains? Increasingly, we have created an environment that rewards people whose greatest expertise is in navigating procurement bureaucracy and systems. South Africa has developed a word for this phenomenon. We call them tenderpreneurs. These individuals are often not manufacturers, they don't innovate, they don't improve, and they frequently do not employ large numbers of people to produce the goods themselves. Their competitive advantage is understanding bureaucracy. Surely that cannot be the objective of public procurement. Public procurement should encourage businesses to be involved, to be productive, to manufacture, to innovate, and to encourage and support local entrepreneurs. Instead, our systems too often favor intermediaries whose primary value lies in managing paperwork rather than creating value. This procurement model also discourages innovation. Innovation, of course, requires flexibility. It requires organizations to test their new approaches, adopt emerging technologies, and respond quickly to changing circumstances. Government finds it very difficult to innovate. By the time a municipality has developed specifications, advertised tenders, evaluated, completed adjudication, finalized appointments, gone back and started again, the technology has already moved on and evolved. Private companies are able to innovate because they're able to move quickly. Government is not. This is one of the many reasons why often municipalities find themselves struggling to adapt to innovations that the private sector has already moved on from. The irony is that in communities increasingly expect municipalities to solve modern problems using systems that were designed for a different era. The burden of these regulatory systems is not experienced equally. Large metros often have dedicated procurement specialists, legal departments, internal auditors, and technical experts. Small municipalities do not enjoy that luxury. The same procurement legislation that may be manageable to a metro, and sometimes not, becomes significantly more burdensome for municipalities with limited staff and limited financial resources. Ironically, the municipalities with the greatest development challenges spend proportionately more of their scarce capacity complying with administrative requirements than actually delivering services. That cannot be the outcome that we intended. The second issue I want to touch today is recruitment. Every municipality will tell you that its greatest assets is its people. Yet our recruitment systems often make attracting and retaining talent more and more or increasingly more difficult. At senior levels, municipal remuneration becomes progressively less competitive. Smaller municipalities simply cannot compete with larger municipalities for engineers, planners, financial specialists, ICT professionals, and other scarce skills. We speak about brain drain and scarce skills in the private sector. Now imagine that at a local municipality in the middle of nowhere where no one wants to go and live. Yet we are within the same regulatory framework that expects us to deliver the same services. So as a result, smaller municipalities frequently become training grounds where talented professionals gain experience before leaving to the private sector or bigger municipalities. Yet the communities that need them the most, capable administrators with skills, experience the greatest difficulty in retaining expertise. This problem is compounded by the limited flexibilities that municipalities have to respond to labor market realities. National bargaining council processes, task grading systems, as well as various levels of concurrence have made it much more difficult for municipalities to employ the type of people that they need to get the job done. A municipality in rural KwaZulu-Natal faces different recruitment challenges from a metropolitan municipality in Gauteng, yet they both operate within the same framework. We should also reflect on the growing degree of centralization that has emerged over time. Repeated levels of concurrence requirements, provincial and national government, are generally introduced to strengthen governance. In practice, they often delay appointments for months. Critical vacancies remain unfilled, acting appointments become prolonged, and institutional stability suffers. And ultimately, communities experience those delays. So our recruitment systems should not prevent municipalities from functioning effectively. The third and last issue that I want to speak about today is decision-making and governance. There is no doubt that municipalities today are subject to more oversight than ever before, and this is in part a good thing. Council committees, Section 79 committees, public accounts, audit committees, performance committees, risk committees, steering committees, technical committees, numerous internal management forums all perform legitimate functions. but collectively they require enormous amounts of administrative effort. The same official repeatedly prepares reports for different audiences. The same information is presented multiple times. The same decisions are revised through different governance structures. Many senior officials spend an extraordinary proportion of their working week preparing for meetings rather than implementing projects. We seldom calculate the opportunity cost of bureaucracy. Every hour an engineer spends preparing committee reports is an hour that they could have spent supervising infrastructure projects. Every hour a chief financial officer spends preparing another compliance return is an hour not spent improving the municipality's financial sustainability. Every hour a municipal manager spends preparing presentations is an hour spent not engaging communities or resolving implementation challenges. Administration has a cost, ladies and gentlemen. The cost is rarely reflected in financial statements, but communities experience it every day through slower delivery. Despite this extraordinary governance architecture, misconduct still occurs. And when it does, consequence management frequently becomes another lengthy, expensive process involving investigations, legal opinions, disciplinary hearings, labor disputes, arbitration procedures, and eventually it ends in litigation anyway. The process can continue for years. They consume significant financial resources and energy of our institutions. But more importantly, they consume management's attention. The purpose of government should be to strengthen delivery. Too often, governance itself becomes the dominant activity. So this brings me what I believe is the central point of today's discussion. I believe government has become exceptionally good at measuring compliance. We measure whether reports were submitted, whether committees met, whether procedures were followed, whether every document was signed, and whether every regulation was observed. Of course, those things do matter, please don't get me wrong, but they are not the purpose of local government. Communities do not live inside a compliance framework. I can see the government officials going like this. Yeah, you know, the reports. They live in towns and cities. They experience outputs, they experience impact, they experience outcomes of the work that we do. We should therefore place far greater emphasis on measuring what actually matters. How many kilometers of roads were rehabilitated? How quickly water leaks are repaired? How reliable is the electricity supply? How many businesses invested into our communities? How many jobs were created for the unemployed? How safe are our people in their homes? And simply, how satisfied are residents with municipal services? These are the measures that ultimately determine whether local government is succeeding. Compliance should remain a means to achieving those outcomes. It should never become the end in itself. In practical terms, what does that mean for a municipality like Umgeni? It means a 7% decline in youth unemployment in 4 years. It means a 10% decline in the Gini coefficient in 4 years. It means 6 million rand saved on saving from electricity losses. It means increasing the number of indigent households that we support from 133 to 3,590. None of what I said today suggests that municipalities should be less subjected to accountability. Accountability is important. It's actually quite the opposite. We should have stronger accountability for outcomes and for impact. If a municipality consistently fails to deliver services, there should be consequences. If projects are delayed unnecessarily, there should be accountability. If corruption occurs, those responsible must face swift and decisive action. But we should distinguish between accountability that improves delivery and bureaucracy that merely creates administrative activity. Good governance enables delivery. It should not replace delivery. As we look to the future of local government, I believe we need to ask ourselves these fundamental questions. Do we trust capable public servants to exercise professional judgment while holding them accountable for the results? Or do we continue building increasingly prescriptive systems that assume every official is incapable of making decisions without another approval, another committee, or another regulation? The answer to that question will shape what the future of local government looks like. So, ladies and gentlemen, our communities do not need municipalities that are just merely compliant. There are plenty of municipalities with clean audits, but no services that are being delivered. They need municipalities that are capable. They need municipalities that can solve problems. They need municipalities that innovate, attract investment, support local business, and importantly, improve people's lives. The purpose of local government has never been to administer compliance. The purpose of local government is to deliver services, create opportunities, and build places where people can thrive. Everything else should be judged against that simple test. If our systems strengthen that mission, we should support them. If they undermine that mission, we should have the courage to reform them. That is what making local government practical truly looks like. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris, for a very powerful presentation. It reminds me of my days in education when I started off way back in 1985, 86. You were given the curriculum and the kids had to read and write at the end of the year. And obviously you had a few AI tools to help the kids to get to that point. But they bureaucratized the entire education system to the point where teachers hardly get to teach. They focus on files for this and portfolios for that. And it creates such a schlep, a bureaucratic burden, that teachers are leaving the profession. And the kids rejoice because there's no person that actually enforce strict discipline and measures to ensure that learning and teaching takes place. And in our days, inspector came around and you either were held accountable for not marking your books and you were dragged to the principal's office, you got a warning letter, etc. What happened over the years, it became highly unionized, highly politicized, and kids at the end of the day with this massive bureaucratic system can't read and write properly. So somehow, and you're right, between holding people accountable, we will make sure that every project delivers and there's impact to improve the lives of our people. Our people deserve it, wherever they live. And I think we've got the brain power to maybe have a relook at the system and revise that needs to be revised. So ladies and gentlemen, we will have a quick... Thank you very much. I need that. So what will happen now is we will have a very short break. Just run to the bathroom and back. You can bring your coffee and tea with. We will have then the panel here in front. I will facilitate, but the panel will not be a regurgitation of what has been presented. We've heard that. We're happy with that. We will allow the audience to ask questions. But please, audience, I know you want to ask a lot of questions and want to make statements, but please keep it short, sweet, simple, to the point, and don't personalize it because you haven't got an answer back from Treasury because of a letter you've written 1,000 years ago. But I think part of it should be, how do we, and this is what this conference is all about. It says here, achieving successful municipal service delivery. And then in bold, it says practical solutions for local governments. So we can zone into those practical solutions. Obviously, the conversation won't end here today. We've got your data. We will communicate with you and we will have an ongoing process in terms of how do we create a network of caring people, people that that want to assist the country in going forward. There's a beautiful saying that says bad things happen because good people, stand on the sidelines. And that time is over. Good people should become part and parcel of the match. How do you think Rassi's team wins every time because he makes sure that he gets the best people as part of his team. So let's have a quick break. Oh yes, let me just get, there's just two groups of people I want to introduce, our board members. Christina, if you can just rise. All right, Kanina, if you can also rise, also board member. Kutsia over there, also one of our board members. I don't see any other board members here, but these are the board members present. And then the staff. And the staff, quick, come to the front. Where's Mandisa, Daniela? Where is Ishmael? Okay. On a call. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, at the foundation, we have a very small staff. Mandisa has joined us recently as our communication manager. Daniela is responsible for hosting this event and making sure that all of our speakers are here present. And then Ishmael Yusuf is also part of the staff. So we've got a diverse group of staff members, highly specialized in their specific fields. And these are the young people that we employ to run the show at the FW de Klerk Foundation. Thank you very much. Yeah. Okay, let's take that 5-minute break. When we come back, we will have a very nice discussion. Okay. On the discussion panel will be obviously our speakers that were present here today.
You can just hold it for now.
Okay, just like that? Yeah. You can plug it. I've got a mic here.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to start. I'm just waiting on Ohalet Singh. She's still busy outside. Ishmael, can you just step forward? So this is also one of our young colleagues, Ishmael Yusuf, one of the staff members. And Ishmael is involved with quite a range of local government activities. He's also, with his team, compiling a very comprehensive assessment of 50 municipalities, which we will release soon. And obviously, it's all about, what differentiate one municipality from another. And the contribution is to ensure that we improve the management, the governance, and everything that has to do with making sure there's an effective institution at local government level. Thank you. Yeah. We also have recently appointed a young man, Leroy Jooste, and his big job is to bring young people to the foundation where they get exposure to, where do we come from? And what does our constitution mean? So at our facility in Cape Town, there's a beautiful exhibition outlining the trajectory from the apartheid system to the constitutional democratic system. And it's really something that people enjoy because it gives them an insight in terms of the transition and how it actually impacted on people's lives, but more so, what should be done to ensure that this democratic system or constitutional democracy, that it really benefits all of the people of South Africa. So please, if you're in Cape Town, come to the foundation, come and visit us. You just say you know me, and then you get free entrance. Okay, can I just get an indication? Is she available? Not yet, but let's start, and then she can join. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, we've got our speakers here. Each one of them brought quite a unique perspective to the challenge that we have in terms of local government, but also very practical solutions. And there's a golden thread that runs through all the presentations in terms of capacity. Do we have the right people there? And then obviously another golden thread that runs through that is over bureaucratized, and how can we make sure that we rather focus on delivery as opposed to all the compliance and layers of compliance that makes it so difficult? And is it really necessary? But how do you balance that in terms of making sure that you hold people accountable? Because that's what the Constitution requires of us. So the idea is that we give an opportunity to the audience to ask one question at a time, and maybe we will allow 5. If you have a pen and paper, if you have the brains to remember, please do so. But let us see who will start with the first questions. Okay, yes, 2 hands. Okay, then there's another hand. Let me start with this block, and I'll give. No, you go ahead. 5 people here, 5 people there, 5 people there. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you very much. It's Chris from the Konrad Adenauer Foundation. Recently, the Public Protector issued a report on Cape Town, and the Constitutional Court case was found against Cape Town in terms of affordable housing development in the city centre. Would you please comment on what effect this has on other cities in South Africa, and what effect it has on furthering citizen well-being?
Next question.
I think this is directed to Issa. I've always wondered whether the National Development Plan is an industrial plan. So I asked ChatGPT and Claude, and I said, in your opinion, do you think the National Development Plan of South Africa is a real industrial plan for a country like South Africa? Chat said no. So I've always felt our country needs an industrial development plan, because an industrial development plan then becomes almost like the spine that allows us to know what we need to do. Why do you think we still are not at that point of getting to, yeah.
Thank you.
I had another question, but I want to
Okay,
ask.
there's a lady there at the back who'd like to pose a question. Please announce yourself and which organization you represent.
Hi, my name is Fini Grobler. I'm from Netwerk 24, a news website in Afrikaans owned by Media24. I would just like to get comment from all the panelists on the Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana's decision yesterday to make a U-turn on the withholding of funds for 169 municipalities. He did explain why he decided to make the U-turn, but he is getting a lot of criticism from all sectors of society saying that this was a mistake. I would like to hear what your thoughts are on that.
Thank you. Another 4th question.
My name is Theo Venter. Technically, I'm a pensioner, but in practice, I'm the DA's mayoral candidate for JB Marks Municipality. Now, before this, for 2 years, I've been the chairman of the Northwest Provincial Growth and Development Strategy, and my question is really towards Department of Water Affairs and Sanitation. My overall impression, especially out of the Northwest, is the following: that the department provides water to towns, bulk water supply in whatever form. It then removes the sewage from towns, but the towns don't do their work. So the department is doing their work and they report to us, like we've seen all the things they're doing, the pipes and the this and the that. But there's no compliance in your towns and there's no consequences to the non-compliance. Even the numbers that they've showed us about people being sent to SAPS or whoever, IDAC, now that we see all going on in Madlanga and so on. But my impression from the province I'm working in and sitting next to the Vaal River system is that towns are not complying, and it seems to me that's where it stops.
And then the last question, anyone? Yeah, right in front.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Nishal Rajnandan. I'm from a private consultancy with a passion for service delivery. So I have a twofold question. The first is more on or directed to Mr. Kalani. I hope I got that right. In your presentation, you mentioned that as a water scarce country, we use about 75% of the ground surface water. Have we looked into the impact of what we need if we were to remove the non-revenue water that is lost by the municipalities, which sits close onto 50%? What impact does that have on our demands? And then just further on in terms of the national infrastructure plan, just speaking around planning, I know we've developed the national infrastructure plan. It's now, I think, 2 years in existence. That has been implemented or accepted. In the development of that plan, there's been a lot of, or has there been consideration for the inputs from the district development model, which is key, I believe, to developing the plan. So Chair, that's my two questions.
Okay,
Thank you.
so just for good order, there were now 7 questions posed. Let's start with Chris, and then we'll work our way from my right to the left. And obviously, there were certain questions that were posed directly to specific colleagues. You deal with that. But then there were general questions. So you can pick and choose whatever you want to answer. Chris, over to you.
Thanks very much for the questions. I don't think any of them were directed at me directly, which is fantastic. Usually I sit in public meetings and have to answer all the questions. Maybe let me comment on the withholding of public funds. I think the intention was good, to try and hold some sort of accountability in local government, especially with those who are crippling other state entities or other levels of government, your water boards, ESCOM, etc. But ultimately, it's the accountability is directed to the wrong people. So you're not withholding funds from the municipality. You're withholding funds from the citizens who rely on services and funding from that municipality. So withholding the budget allocation to an entity of government does not solve the problems of that entity of government. It just makes it even harder for that level of government to deliver some sort of services, even if it was basic, to the citizens of that area. I think the root cause is still not being addressed, and it's easier to withhold funding and get nice headlines than to deal with the root cause, which is the politics. The politics of local government doesn't work, as well as the support model for local government. Whether it's the debates around equitable share models, whether it is around taxation, whether it is around some of the things that we've spoken about today, bureaucracy and skills, all of those sorts of things. Intention, good; execution, poor. You can't punish the citizens for politicians and bureaucrats' failures. Just a brief comment on water and sanitation. We're not a water services authority as a municipality, and we're exploring how we can become one. And that's mainly because our district municipality is failing to deliver certain things. So we're trying to take over more functions to be able to deal with that. But what we found out in the process is that despite we have this Department of Water and Sanitation, and forgive me if I'm incorrect or out of place here, But the Department of Water and Sanitation doesn't have much control or teeth to bite your water service providers and your water service, especially your water service authorities. There's nothing really in the legislation that gives them the ability to fix these things. So you have this disjuncture. You have local government who has a lot of pressure to be able to deal things, withholding of funding, all these sorts of things that we talk about. But district municipalities whose water prices aren't even regulated. So you have this big gap in legislation, which goes back to the actual reason why district municipalities created and the rethink that needs to happen there. Nichelle, I don't believe in the district development model. We talk about layers on layers of layers to fix the problems that exist. The district development model is yet another layer of bureaucracy that is unfunded, that has no dedicated officials to work towards it. And I think it's just another level of bureaucracy to try and solve a problem. We already have spatial development frameworks, we have district frameworks, we have provincial frameworks. All of these things exist to try and bring development. And maybe then the last comment on the Cape Town court matter, but we're not a metro, we don't provide housing, but I think the core of that ruling, and I think Dr. Sutcliffe will have a better understanding of it, the core there is not necessarily about intention, but it's about process. So when you delve into that court's judgment, it's more about process there than intention. So the important thing there is that you might have some sort of an intention as a municipality, but don't bypass or skirt around processes to try and get there.
Thank you. Ometi?
Yes, on my side, the quick answer to the question around whether the National Development Plan is actually an industrial plan, and the answer is no. So in the early, I think between 2000 and 2005, and I know this because I was a very junior official at the Department of Trade and Industry. At the time, there was a document called the Integrated Manufacturing Strategy. It then evolved into something called Microeconomic Reform Strategy. It then morphed into another document called ASGISA. I now can't even remember what it stood for. It then evolved into a document called the New Growth Path. It then morphed into a document called Industrial Policy Action Plan, whose tenets of it then morphed into the Economic and Reconstruction, ERRP, Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan during the COVID days. And there's now something new. It's called the Jobs and Growth and Jobs Strategy. In shorthand, they call it GAIN, right? So GAIN is sitting on three pillars. One is on public service reforms, and then there is an infrastructure leg, and then there is the industrial policy leg, right? So that's the evolution of all of that. So all of it are linked somewhat, but it's not the National Development Plan. So that whole focus area is spearheaded by the current Department of Trade and Industry and Competition, and it's centered around building back, manufacturing capability, manufacturing capacity in South Africa to offset, this importation of finished products and high value products. There's a lot that needs to happen insofar as that is concerned. One of them is just getting the transport and logistics network right. So let's give you an example. So you've got under the Tshwane SEZ, Tshwane Special Economic Zone, you've got the geographic space. I mean, you've got Ford, you've got BMW, and now you've got, I think it's Chery, the automotive company there. They are manufacturing vehicles, but those vehicles are transported by trucks from there to Durban Container Terminal or Durban Port, and then off to export markets. We worked on a project to support Transnet called Project Ukuvuselela. It's a high-speed rail project so that you can evacuate those vehicles using rail straight into the Durban, to Port Elizabeth port and then out to export markets. We then received, we could unlock, I think, 2.4 billion rand of viability gap, they call it, just to augment the balance sheet of Transnet in order to build that rail line. That was 2 years ago. And then a year later, we get a letter from National Treasury, or Transnet gets a letter from Treasury to say they're rescinding on that decision, which means it's back to square one, right? But the manufacturing competitiveness, or what they call comparative and competitive advantage of South Africa in relation to industrial policy, in relation to manufacturing capacity and capability, rests on everything else working. Whether it is skills, your ability to mobilize OEMs to relocate to South Africa and so on, the tax incentives that you get, all of those things must come together in order to support industrialization or industrial policy. So it's quite complex, but National Development Plan is certainly not an industrial policy. So Grok and Claude and ChatGPT was correct when you asked that question. That's right. And I think, and I don't want to speak on behalf of DTIC, but I think that's the intention. Yes. Let me not get there. And so, and I think, Mayor Papas, you answered the question around DDM and so on. Look, the development of the National Infrastructure Plan 2050 was very much a consultative process. We had the reference group made up of academics, infrastructure experts, and all sorts of role players. We had the government component, we also had the private sector component, and we looked at the National Special Development Framework, we looked at different sectoral master plans, we looked at this DDM model, we looked at the provincial infrastructure investment plans and to inform the National Infrastructure Plan 2050. It's a aspirational, it's a vision like type of document, that sets the targets for 2050. For example, in the energy space, we know that for South Africa to remain globally competitive, you've got to have at least 175 gigawatt of installed capacity by 2050. So the integrated resource plan, the different energy plans that the Department of Energy and Electricity has, is working towards achieving that vision that we set in the National Infrastructure Plan. But from a principal perspective, it is a bottom-up, top-down sort of product.
Hybrid.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mike, over to you.
Can you hear me?
Michael,
Well, let me
sorry.
run through a few of those that have been fobbed in my direction here by my good mayor friend on the right. Because he doesn't want to talk about Cape Town, hey? He might get into trouble with his boss. But the reality is both of those judgments are well worth reading. So the first of those is the Constitutional Court judgment on affordable housing. Actually, it's nothing to do with affordable housing. It is about exactly the spatial reality I was talking about earlier on. Completely applicable elsewhere. And it says that while Cape Town must get its act together, it's actually saying National Treasury and other institutions must provide more funding, must provide land, must provide this, but we cannot have continuation of this disjuncture where now it's 40 to 60% of a person's wage, of a working person's wage, is now going on transport. Clogs up freeways, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a really good judgment, but if you go to the end, you'll see that they really are talking in general. Just as all of the key judgments they've had, they'll use a case study, and which in the case of Cape Town is important because obviously if you see the way in which even the inner city development has occurred, although the current mayor, I know he's pushing for some of the affordable housing, and in fairness to them, SHRA, which is our national agency dealing with social housing, has all sorts of other issues there, but they can't keep up with where the city is saying we want some social housing in our affordable housing. I don't know if everyone knows that distinction there, but it's really that if you're a private sector operator and you want to come and build housing, and you want social housing, which is obviously like rent control, affordable housing is saying within the gap market, and then you want some private sector housing around that, normal private sector, which kind of funds some of it. Usually that's the financial model you look for. So it's in fairness to Cape Town, it's also that Shra can't keep up with the demand. So if you look at their 5-year plan, it's not that they don't have plans for specific areas that are within the greater CBD, if I could call it that. But it's just they're having difficulty in getting the funding there. But it has big implications. And if you look at the Public Protector's report, and what I like about their reports, they demand Cape Town must respond within 30 days or whatever, but national government must respond within a certain, I think it's 6 months they're given, where the key national departments have to talk about the funding model. And it's unacceptable that we still have a funding model in our country where the demand is at that local level. And we blame municipalities and mayors like Chris here and others for all the problems. But actually, it's a problem of South Africa as a whole. You can't have 8 or 9% of the national fiscus going to local government. It should be a minimum of 15%. Because once you do that, you can deal with these bigger picture water and other challenges that we have. And yes, it does mean that we get rid of that compliance. That I certainly agree with the Mayor's presentation that he had at the end there, because National Treasury, just go and look at all the circulars that get issued there. And part of my fight with him is that we went from the concept of what an IDP should be, which is a strategic document saying for the long term, but for particularly the next 5 years, because it's supposed to be a long-term strategy, for the next 5 years, these are the things we will do as a municipality. And instead, it's now a document that, as I was saying earlier on, it's longer than the Bible. And in fact, if you don't understand the Bible, well, go and read the IDP, and then you'll realize the Bible at least is written in better English. So it's really a waste of time. And all they become is these layers of onions now. The people, each year, they just sort of add in a few paragraphs, and they forget to get rid of paragraphs that are meaningless. It's a waste of time. So I wouldn't use IDPs. They just, again, become compliance documents because any decision of council has to say, is this in the IDP? And it's written to be anything. So I think we've got to reform that dramatically. This idea that every branch of government now is an expert. We've now got Public Service Commission saying they're going to get involved in local government. They haven't a clue about how local government management systems operate. Public service is quite different at a provincial level and national level. So we've really got to reform those. And those have nothing to do with politics. It's just that we've got ourselves into a compliant state there. Very quickly on the issue of DDM, I hold a very different view. The DDM itself was an attempt to go back to what the Constitution and the law originally said, where you would divide the country into district-stroke metros or Category A municipalities, which are, and at that level, you would deal with the bulk services, you deal with the bigger picture, and then you allow, at a more localized level, water service authorities, etc. What then happened was the reaction in the 1990s, some of these are too young to remember those, but you had the white municipalities all kicking up a huge fuss and saying that we don't want, in the case of Pietermaritzburg did not want to deal with the water in Vuntlela, for example, or in Mbali or Edendale. So the result was they said, we want to keep water here, and if you need to deal with water at a district. It's never worked. So if you look across our province, KZN, actually in all those provinces, these water district authorities don't work because that's the issue that Chris was raising, that you end up with this imbalance because they're so widespread in terms of what they have to do, they can't get the correct rates going there. So we're going to reform that. I think the new white paper, the draft white paper, is saying let's move in the direction of single-tier municipalities, whether they're at a DDM level, not the current districts, whether they're that or what they are, but at least have it where a mayor of a municipality and the municipal manager know that they are managing those delivery powers there. But it is a mess because the water department come along and they've now got 144 water service authorities in the country, or whatever the figure is, and we have 257 municipalities. So you just, it's not the way to run a railroad, basically, those. On the, I think you're going to deal with water anyway, so let me leave it at that for now.
Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you. I will start with a question on pollution in Northwest. Of course, it's across the country, but maybe to clarify the issue of mandates and responsibilities. From a departmental point of view, in terms of National Water Act, we provide raw water. In terms of to the water boards and the sector as a whole. And where there are water boards, then the water boards will provide bulk water services to the municipalities. And the municipalities are responsible for drinking water provision as well as wastewater removal. So it's not the department that's responsible for that. But as a department, as a regulator, indeed, we are responsible for developing the policies, regulations, starting from the issuing of water use licensing, which will then come with the conditions on the discharge, on how much water needs to be released back into the water resource. So that is where then we will come in terms of regulating our municipalities in terms of the Water Act. Indeed, as reflected on our green drop, the status quo is not very conducive to clean water that is being discharged back, or to clean waste discharged back into the rivers. And in terms of the Water Act, we have to intervene first. Once we issue a license, there needs to be a compliance monitoring by the department on the compliance with the conditions of a license, whether it's a license issued under the Water Act or under the previous prescripts. And then once we monitor that there's non-compliance, we start administratively engaging the polluter, whether it's a mine or a farmer or whoever it is. And then we take through that process. But of course, it's a long process. As you could see from our stats, we are talking about 53 or so cases that we are currently dealing with. Each case can take up to more than 4 years, just up to successful prosecution, or to convince the NPA to say this case has to be taken forward. And then what happens in the meantime, the rivers continue to be polluted. So we have to then make sure that how we come up with other legislative review as a department, noting the limitations of the current Water Act. For example, the sanctions that are there are not that very serious, or for some of the polluters, they are able, maybe someone can budget for a particular fine to say, well, if this is the fine that I'll be paying, they can continue to do pollution. So what the amendment to the National Water Act are looking at that, and also are looking at the accountability at a level of the accounting officer. Accounting officer can be a CEO of a company, can be a municipal manager. So as a municipal manager, you need to prove that you exercised your functions, your mandate, to the best of your ability, then to say that we are trying to deal with the issues of the pollution that eventually goes into our water resources. And we are also, in terms of the Water Services Act, because there are also limitations into what we can do as a department. So the amendments are also talking into that to say what initiatives that the department can do in terms of sanctions for those that are not complying. And we are also reviewed the norms and standards in terms of the new requirements. And then we are mandated to develop a national polluter register, where we have issued you notices, directives, but still there is no positive compliance. And then this register will indicate areas where there is pollution, sources of pollution. Indeed, there are issues that will have to be considered in terms of PIA and so on, which legally we're still dealing with. But that pollution register as well will be able to assist us to know where there's pollution and what then can be done in terms of the legislation to deal with those. And we are also dealing with the polluter pay principle as mandated by the pricing strategy. the polluter pays principle is talks to the waste discharge charge that we are supposed to effect for everyone that is releasing water back into the water resources. And then there's a mitigation charge as well, where, for example, there has been determination that there is pollution that is going to this particular, let's say it's a dam, and we are able to identify that who are those polluters, and then we can specifically in that catchment be able to implement a mitigation charge that is able to try at minimizing the pollution that goes into our resources, or that the discharges are in line with the requirements of the Water Act. But it is work in progress, I may say. And then on the issue of the planning, the impact of non-revenue water, it's, if we look at eThekwini, it's about 50%, or even the leaks. So to supply water to you, maybe say, Christo, you want, I have to, then the municipality, which means we will have to double what it releases or its supplies to its supply to its customers, because most of it goes through, is lost through the systems, and then what has happened is that for example, the water boards are abstracting more than, in some cases, more than what is allocated to them, more than the water use licenses. And then when we strengthen our legislation or our directives to say you are now over abstracting more than what you are allocated to do, and then it becomes a problem then, because most of the customers will not be able to receive their water. So it's a challenge that has to be factored into the planning for new water resources.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Can I just add a small thing on competency, because I think that we haven't touched on that as much as we should, is that the other important thing that National Water do is to deal with making sure that municipalities have the right competence, and particularly the new regulations. Because you've got many instances where someone has an electricity background, but they're sitting as a head of water or deputy head there. We're just doing some work with local government CETA on the sector skills plans, for example. And when you look at that, when I was looking at the database, there's about 320,000 employees in municipalities. When you take the professional categories and technical, about a half of those employees are NQF level 4 or less. That means matric. Now, you can be in a professional department and you might be a person just employed as a clerk there. But the reality is, if we don't really focus much more on that, we're losing really good professional engineers and others who need to learn the profession. Young people joining municipalities, after 3 or 4 years, they've got some idiot who's their boss, and they leave. And so I think that issue impacts. And if you're talking about things that you as communities could be doing, was to ask of your municipality, provide us with the CVs of your senior people in those service delivery departments, because we have to deal with that.
Thank you, Michael. I've got a solution for this rivers that gets polluted by municipalities. I think ban all municipal officials and mayor, whoever, from buying water. Let them drink that polluted water. You see how quickly they fix it. But be that as it may, I just don't want the media to use that as a heading name. Okay, right. The group here in the middle. Let's quickly. Where's the staff? Provide the mics there. Okay, start here right in front, and we move our way to the back. Where's the other mic? Okay, go ahead. Short and sweet.
No, thank you so much. My name is Alderman Al Kongobese. Most of the questions that I have been covered by presenters. I've spent 31 years in the local government in the city of Ekurhuleni, being an MMC for roads and transport, and as well as human settlement. I'm now a member of the National Assembly. Really, for me, let's get the right people, because for a local government, if we don't get it right there, then we must forget about everything else. You have councillors who can't read the agenda. We have mayors who don't know why they are there. we are not going to solve all these problems we are talking about here. So my contribution is that let's get the right people for a job in the local government. I thank you.
Thank you. Next. Justice staff.
I'm Anila Biskachne. I'm a private consultant, but also affiliated to the Institute for Local Government Management. Having seasoned politicians and administrators here, the one question that we need to ask is the influence of politics on local government. Specifically with respect to the amendments on the Public Service Amendment Act that restrict executive powers. What is the panel's view on the requirements for that? I know that Dr. Sutcliffe has mentioned that there's no need to regulate coalitions, but if we don't do that, we're heading for a serious disaster after the elections. So just comments on that, and if maybe also allow me another question. Is it not time to really rationalize the support mechanisms for local government? Mayor Pappas referred to the fact that we've got regulation all around. Support nowadays is perceived as being regulation. Is it not the time to rationalize that? Look at SALGA, COCTA, all the different treasury, government's technical advisory committees, everything that is related to support but actually does not affect support. To establish a dedicated agency focused on service delivery solutions, away from politics, technical advisory, so that we do away with consultancy services that spread over 275 local authorities, replicated 275 times all over, and no quality assurance being done on that. Thank you.
Thank you. In front, and then there at the back. Then we've got 5. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. My name is Sarah Finley, and I work for an organization called Open Cities Lab, opencitieslab.org, if anybody would like to look us up. We are a small nonprofit that has focused on supporting municipalities for the last 10 years with data and digital tools, solutions to help with decision-making around service delivery. And my comment that I'll convert into a question is, across all the challenges that were mentioned in the presentations, there was very little, if anything, around data and the digital systems that implementers in municipalities use to make the decisions, and how they are so siloed and so fractured that even within the same department, officials are using different systems that aren't integrated and don't communicate. And maybe a small plug for our work is that we provide straightforward solutions to ensure those integrations, so that the Water and Sanitation Department, for the first time in its operations in the city of Cape Town, for example, has a single unified view over customers, billing, water losses, leaks, other infrastructure issues that they'd never had before. All the data and systems operated individually, and so resources and time was spent manually reconciling data sets. Now, through these through these straightforward solutions, for the first time, officials can see there's a loss of water pressure in the system, and we can pinpoint exactly where it is, and we can send inspectors to go and deal with that.
Excellent.
And so data and digital systems has not really been mentioned.
Yeah. And then a gentleman over there and right there at the back. Yeah. Go ahead. And then we can give.
Good afternoon. My name is Christo Bester. I'm from Sake Liga. I've actually had a few questions for National Treasury. It's unfortunate that they're not here. So what I'll do is I'll direct one of the questions to National Treasury. Maybe Major Pappas can answer that because he's in local government. And then also then I'll have a question for the Water Department. With regards to, and obviously the lady from Network 24, isn't the solution when the Minister of Finance says I'm going to withhold the equitable share, because we must remember the equitable share is percentages of money that goes to a municipality that will help them with indigenous households and so forth. Isn't the solution, rather than to threaten and then backtrack, to say, I'll be the agent as National Treasury to keep that percentage of water usage, Eskom, electricity? Isn't the solution that National Treasury directly pay that percentage to that services providers? Wouldn't that solve the problem if we are here to talk about solutions? And then the question for Major Papas is quite a few-fold, is do you, and if you have, how many public-private partnerships do you have in your local municipality? And if you don't have, do you have any other memorandum of understandings of collaboration agreements with private sector? And then for the water the representative, there's been said that you can't do anything about the water and so forth, but two questions. One, who is paying the fines that you issue against municipalities with regards to pollution? Who's actually paying the fines? And secondly, you enter into a water license agreement with that water authority. Now, if they don't comply, isn't that purely a breach of license agreement? And why can't you take it then away from that water authority and go into the private sector to say, we've got a license to be issued, and why can't you issue it to a private sector?
Thank you. And then the last question there to the Mbeki Foundation.
Thank you very much, Chair. My name is Bongani Kupe from the Thabo Mbeki Foundation. I like the approach that we're looking at practical solutions. I think there's someone who stood in front and said one of the biggest problems is leadership. We can have the best plans in the world. I think the lady out there has looked at all the policy changes. In 10 years, we've got 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 of those. If you don't have leadership with the best plan, you are not going to be able to address that. I think the second thing, we work in one of the municipalities, I'm glad it has been mentioned here, that there's a very adversarial relationship between local business and municipal sort of political sort of structures. They don't talk to each other. I mean, and yet to attract investment into that municipality, you need business to support what needs to be attracted. Business talks better to another business, and therefore they can be able to attract those investment. The third issue is that I think we need to really revisit freebies. The free water, free electricity, free school, free housing, free this. The truth of the matter is people don't feel ownership of anything that happens in that area. The only approach we do as human beings, we extract value. We want to take without basically plowing back. I think we need to really strictly revisit what do we do. Let me give you an example. I mean, infrastructure South Africa, one of the areas that I found very quite interesting, if you look at apartheid special planning, we had ranks. Even today, we still have ranks. You can't close the special planning without sort of changing even your address, your how you name that infrastructure. Taxis have got two things. They've got assets and they've got sort of cash flow, which basically they need to use. And yet, even if you go to the taxis thing, it's a place to urinate, it's a place to do wrong things and things like that. Unless we turn those assets and make them be community sort of driven interchanges that supports local business and that do this. So I think the solution is that people must feel ownership of these things if they are to look after them. Thank you.
Thank you. So let us manage this. I've got 15 minutes. So within the next 5 minutes. I need to get short, sweet, to the point answers because I want to also go to the last group. And I've got a couple of online questions. Starting with Chris, over to you. Short and sweet, no pun intended.
Oh, that's very kind of you. Let me start from the back. Bongani, thank you. In terms of, yes, local government is, well, in general, adversarial towards business. I think there's a lack of understanding between what both want in the jurisdictions. Business moves quickly. Business wants to help now. Business wants to do it. Government has to navigate those regulations. You have politicians who have to navigate public perception. So there is that adversarial. In Mgeni, what we say, we want the municipality to be, or people to look at it and say, this is our municipality. We don't want people to say the municipality. So we're creating this outward focused municipality, and it's hard to change those entrenched systems, especially to get public servants to realize that the private sector is not always trying to take their jobs, but we're trying to do things better. I disagree with you with freebies, but I guess that's the quarter socialist in me talking. Public-private partnerships, Christo, yes, we do have, but not in the traditional treasury sense. It is far too difficult to work with national government regulations to get PPPs done. Just the feasibility studies for a municipality our size costs tens of millions of rands. So we navigate that, let me use that word, by doing things, for example, having 9-year, 11-month leases with first rights to renew, and letting developers then build what they need to build to create jobs, etc. We do have partnerships with people like Infrastructure South Africa. We create memorandums of understanding with community tourism organizations, tourism bodies, events coordinators. We support NPOs for social support indirectly. So we'll give funding for them to do social programs as opposed to relying on government. And then there are 4 companies or entities that we have PPPs with. And these are for various different developments in the municipality. Let me skip that one for now. Alderman, yes, right people in right places, short story. And this is no disrespect to my own municipal manager. It's just an example of a panel that I sat on. To become a municipal manager, there's so many regulations that you have to tick, right? But all you're doing is running a really complicated organization that with a certain budget. But we exclude so many people in the private sector who run more complicated businesses with bigger budgets, with bigger customer bases over a bigger geography. We say, no, sorry, you can't because you haven't got the relevant experience in government. So you make your pool smaller and smaller and smaller, and those who are really good leave to National Treasury, they leave to COCTA, they leave to whatever. So it becomes very hard, especially in rurals. Let me stop there. Sarah. Open cities sounds fantastic. Data and digitization is very expensive. As an example, we want to upgrade our billing systems, integrated with our GIS. A whole lot of different things, valuations. That's going to cost 8 million rand just for that. So now I must consider whether or not I go and I give freebies to poor households who are unemployed living on 360 rand a month. I'm not sure if any of you have done that. It's very difficult. Or I must spend 8 million rand towards a new billing system. However, there are systems that exist that we can tap into. For example, the indigent management system. You have Home Affairs, you have SASA, you have DSD, you have a number of organizations who keep the same information but don't talk to each other. And then the municipalities go and duplicate that information at great cost. So I think there are opportunities to better manage data, and it'll have a huge impact on what we do.
Next.
Very quickly, I mean, I think this issue of Thabo Mbeki Foundation, Bongani's issue, and interestingly, Helen Zille has also been raising some issues, who's watching the show online here, around how we deal with these freebies, these issues of how you deal with well-located land, etc. We do need to have a real rethink there. We can't be giving RDP houses, which nowadays are costing, let's say, 350,000 Rand to produce the house, and then we never charge anyone rates in those houses. We cannot do that anymore. I mean, we've really got to start saying, how do we make sure there's a program in place that deals with that? Well-located land, how do we make sure that we maximize? There are many cities in the world that say X percentage of any unit being produced in particularly inner city environments would be under a rent control system. So yes, you want to come and build, get well-located land from the state. However, you produce affordable housing, particularly rental housing in those contexts. So we've got to rethink this thing. This idea that we give rates rebates is nonsense. I know many developers now who are not paying their rates every month because they know at the end of the year, and particularly when it comes to elections, we'll say, oh, if you pay half your rates, the other half we'll write off. There are these crooked developers that I know that every day appear in court because building regulations say that if you don't submit plans, we'll charge you 100 Rand. 100 Rand a day for not doing a development that is 50 million or 100 million in value, and not have building plans for that. We've got to deal with that issue very seriously, and I do agree with those speakers.
Very quickly.
Thank you. On the issue of licensing, I think it's two types of licenses. One is the water use license that we issue. It's reviewed every 5 years, and when it's reviewed, we look at the compliance with the conditions. That's an individual license. And the one that I talked about in the presentation is the proposed one, where it will be issued to the water services providers across water services authorities. That's one. The department is developing a licensing system which will be compulsory for all water services providers. We will be issuing those licenses, and for municipalities, because they've got a responsibility or mandate to appoint water services provider, they will appoint only those that have got the license. And should a municipality itself, if it provides the service, it needs to comply as well. It needs to be licensed. So should it not maybe meet the requirements or conditions of the license, then it will be compelled then to look for the services elsewhere. And it needs then whoever it looks for must also have the license to supply water or to be a water services provider. But if you then fail to meet the requirements, then you lose the license.
Yeah, thank you. Then let's go to the last group, and perhaps the Japanese ambassador, you have something, and then we go to the group over there.
Well,
You're welcome, sir.
thank you, and thank you for this opportunity. And I hesitate to say something because I should be not interferes internal affairs. So just a personal 3 comments. One is that, as many people say, I think it is very much important to recruit the competent people. And I think there are as a political leaders, such as executive mayors or councillors. So these are the people of the political, giving a political guidance and to absorb the people's need in the community. But at the same time, we need some competent bureaucrat or technocrat. But for that, I wonder if we can ask these people to be politically neutral, or if we can, it is possible to offer the sufficient or appropriate salary to recruit these competent people. This is one comment. And another comment is that there are many presentations and discussions about how to develop the municipalities or local areas. And in Japan also, this is a very serious problem. And as in many cases in Japan, the population in local areas is decreasing. And then what happens is that we need to provide the minimum services, but cost effectiveness is very bad. But there are few people, but you need a certain level of the services. So in this case, I suppose the community or municipality cannot take care of such service provision. And then it is necessary that the provinces or the national government should support such needs in the local areas. So how to do it? I think there's several people say that what is the obligation or the responsibility of the government, national government side, and what is the responsibility of the municipality or the communities. So it seems to me that there is not so clear guideline how to distinguish between the national responsibility and the community or municipal responsibility. Last point is that many people also mentioned about the PPP. And I think it is necessary. And the infrastructure, the organization's the representative said about some 2 provinces test cases or something like that. But for that, I think that to involve the private sector, it is very much necessary that these private sector companies could be profitable. So we need some tangible project so that the participant private sector companies could be getting the profit from such projects. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's go to the last group. We've got 5 minutes left. But here's just one question, online question, because I think you've answered most of the online questions indirectly. But the big question that somebody raises is, if there's one project, Infrastructure South Africa, that you would want to launch that will have a multiplier impact, what will that infrastructure development be? So just bear that in mind. Okay, let's go there. Okay.
Thank you, Christo. My name is Hetien von Alba-Mulman. I'm from the Small Business Institute on the board responsible for sector coordination, and we're also affiliated to BUSA Business Unity South Africa. So this is, okay, Christo, we all know you once were in the driver's seat of this organization. Still miss you, sir. This is rather a comment, and we know that as organized business, our approach to success in the towns and municipalities is a public-private community partnership. And saying that, for example, Machabeng, Masamula, we partner in Machabeng with the SBI chamber there. So today, Christo, my input is just that the SBI wants to commit to this FW de Klerk initiative, our capacity and our expertise.
Thank you very much for that. Okay, last questions there in the corner.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the opportunity. My name is Boiketlo Mongatu from the New Zealand High Commission. Just a small question. I wonder whether our local councils, especially the ones in the more urban areas, are prepared for the possible revenue loss associated with an increased number of households going, so to say, off the grid. In terms of no longer using electricity, water from the councils, and also some households who are more eager to go into the recycling and getting more of their waste collected by these private service providers who collect and recycle waste. So I was just wondering about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let us, before we go to the answers, just very quickly, sorry, I have to manage now a couple of online questions. Daniela, you sent it to me. The issue of affordable rental housing. Michael, why do you believe rental housing deserves greater policy attention than traditional ownership-based approaches? Then I have Mametsi, the one aspect of current municipal infrastructure delivery systems, what would have the greatest impact? And then to Mayor Chris Pappas, it says, if an average South African municipality adopted one thing that Ngani does differently tomorrow, what would deliver the fastest and most visible improvement in service delivery? Yeah, okay. Let's start, Chris, and then we go.
Oh, sorry, we just have one question in the back row that we also need to capture.
Sorry for that. Okay.
Christo, thanks a lot. We are a small company, Duxet Media, but we work in partnership with the burger. Our online presence is ebeeldschool.coza. So our intention is to produce the engineers and the medical staff and the business people that we need in South Africa. My question is this. I see a number of people knowing what a rot is in our local governments. And I think most of us do know what a rot is. My question be this, without answering us from the perspective of the enclaves that we are living in, what is the disconnect between what we know what is wrong and that we have to fix? What is that disconnect? But please don't answer it from the small enclaves that we're living in.
Thank you. Okay, let's start, Chris.
Sure. Okay. Firstly, Your Excellency, just condolences to the loss after the recent earthquake. 100% agree with you. We do need politically free administrations that would make a huge difference in South Africa. Politically conscious, but free of intimidation and the like. I like that triple P with the C, with the communities. I think that's lovely. That'll take 15 years to get through National Treasury, but we'll propose it. But as a municipality, we'll adopt that. In terms of the solar, so firstly, from a waste perspective, for us, waste is an economic service. We don't aim to make money out of it. We aim to cover our costs. And in doing so, we are much more competitive than the private sector in doing that. We don't make money off of people. Solar, yes, it is an issue. It's more of an issue when there's load shedding and there's lack of power. The average South African household can't afford to invest in the type of solar to get yourself off of the grid for a 4 or 5 family home, the average working South African we found. But when there's load shedding, people then make sacrifices to have that electricity. So we've seen a decrease in the impact. The biggest impacts that can be made: paint the street lines, cut the grass, fix the street lights, collect the waste. Those are the visible things. But the biggest institutional change I would do is cut waste and things that are not a priority and focus on maintenance. That is a big thing that we've done. And then the last question, you ask about the disconnect. The connection, not the disconnection. The connection is that the people who are meant to hold us as local government politicians accountable are the same people who rely on us to canvass for them to get votes when they want to go to parliament and to provincial legislatures. So political parties don't hold their councillors accountable because when it comes to elections for national and provincial government, they need us as councillors to be going knocking on doors, making sure that those seats are there. So the difference between a good political party and one that is not so good is one that holds their local government councillors accountable even when it is difficult.
Next.
So I'm asked the question, what's the single biggest project that we must embark on as Infrastructure South Africa? And I imagined I'm sitting in my exco and I'm asking that question. So I've got transport infrastructure specialists, I've got water specialists, I've got ICT infrastructure specialists. Every one of them will be advocating for their sector. But in my view, the biggest game changer is what you spoke to around the digitization of government information and systems. We did some work in my previous department with Accenture, the consulting firm, and it shows that if you can digitize government services, you can unlock 4.8 trillion rand of value to the economy and to society. Let me just give you a small example. So when an MNO, mobile network operator, Vodacom, MTN, Liquid Telecom, they apply to a municipality, say City of Tshwane, for a wayleave application, right, to deploy, to trench and deploy broadband infrastructure. As soon as that information, that application gets received by the municipality, guess what? There's a person who drives a van, they go to the electricity department, which is situated somewhere else. They must now check with their GIS mapping and so on, where they need to trench for broadband infrastructure, what electricity infrastructure is there, and it's not going to disturb that. He then takes the form after 6 months. He drives to another department. They must check water infrastructure. Takes that form drives to another branch, they look for another type of infrastructure. Imagine if you had digitized that process alone, right? So as soon as it's online, you submit, they can immediately see what's going on that road infrastructure that's required, and that decision making can be made within 30 days. That's a revenue to the municipality. That's cost savings to the applicant. That's a construction and deployment of infrastructure. That's job creation. That's value created in the economy. Just by digitizing those type of systems and processes in government, you get far much more value, in my view, that you can create almost instantly by investing in that digital infrastructure that's required in government. And so for me, if we can get there, if we can be the next Estonia, for example, where if you are stopped at the robot by a traffic officer, by scanning your license in Gauteng, they can see what tickets are outstanding in Limpopo, what warrant of arrests are outstanding from NPA, and they can, you see, if these government processes are integrated and they're available and you can see them at an instant, that's cost savings that you can direct the funding to something else, to hard infrastructure, for example. Yeah.
Michael?
My quick things, Henny, I think, raised this issue of his feeling was that politicians were the corrupt ones. I think what Matlanga is teaching us, it's not. Politicians, if anything, are being led by their noses. Maybe they appointed the corrupt people, but it's all about that administration. If those administrations were doing their job properly, you wouldn't have the potential for others to be corrupted. So the first thing we've got to get right is the officials themselves. So if you don't deal with it, so I think there's this focus on it's about politics or political parties or whatever. In the end, it's that administration. If you appoint people who've got the potential for corruption, they are going to use politicians if need be, but 90% of the corruption that occurs doesn't even need political oversight or political involvement there. So I think we've got to put our focus now on that. And the two things that come out for me in Matlanga is if you're an official and for the last 5 years think that that second cell phone that you have for your corrupt purposes is going to help you, don't worry, you're going to end up there at some point. And that certainly is an important issue there. The disconnect that was raised, for me, it is about making sure that three fundamental issues must happen. Number one, there must be responsiveness. If a question is asked by the community, you need to get a response within a day that's saying when it will be responded within 2 weeks. You can answer any issue in local government to say, these are the complexities, it will be on budget, won't be, or whatever the issue is. All the municipalities I deal with, the biggest issue is responsiveness. Because once you're responsive, you have to be transparent. You have to make sure that all that information that is required is available. So including the issues of who's going to get the names of the people, who's going to get access to the housing that's being created by a municipality or the service sites or whatever. The more you see that, and I'm sorry to say that I've seen some of these databases where people have been given properties that haven't been born yet, that their date of birth is 2042. So we've got to begin to make sure that we're putting all of those things out for public consumption there. And the last issue about how we get this disconnect sorted out, for me, the easiest way to do it was to force our key departments, delivery departments, so that was water, electricity, sanitation, transport, etc., on any developmental issue of size. You can't do it for everything. They must all sit around the table. And suddenly the economists actually started understanding engineering. Engineers understood environment. Environmentalists understood economic issues. And you start getting that and say, you sit at this table until you've all approved a development with your conditions, but you do it collectively. Once you get that, it's very difficult for other people to move out there.
Right. Okay, that's great. Dear audience and participants, we've come to the end of a very fruitful, very insightful conference. Municipalities, in my view, they are the builders of beehives. If that beehive is conducive for the bees to come and generate honey, then obviously it's an effective functioning beehive. If that beehive is rotten to the core, it's toxic, the bees will just stay away. And the end result is no honey. And I think we've discussed at length, the challenges, but we know what are the solutions. And then the bigger question is, how do we then bring about that change? Not only through legislation and through all the regulatory frameworks and layer upon layer of, bills and acts, but also to change the mindset of people who avail themselves as councillors, as mayors, because we can have the best laws and regulatory frameworks, but if people lack basic ethics and a drive to really serve the community, then we have serious problems. But be it as may, I really want to thank you all for being part of this gathering today. Obviously, we will make the presentations available to all of the participants. I think it's important. Secondly, if you need to directly contact any of the people here in front, we will obviously liaise with them and then make the contact detail available. Unfortunately, the POPIA Act prevents us just to take their contact detail and share it with everyone. But the idea of creating a broad network of capable people, capable organizations that come up with new ideas and so forth, please let us work towards that. And today has laid the basis for that network. It's not a bureaucratic network with a chairperson, this and that and that. It's a network of volunteers that want to contribute to improving the lives of people out there and ensuring that the values, the aspirations embedded in our national constitution, that becomes a reality for all South Africans. On that note, we've got a beautiful, I don't want to use words like beautiful, and I sound like that other person. There's a very nice lunch out there, so please join us and drive safely home, and thank you for being here today. Thanks. Can I ask that the people just stay here in front? Kutsia, also, Kanina, can you step forward? Daniela, just come forward.